Bum. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da. Ba-da. Ba-da-da. 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 Yeah. We survived a hellish Monday. You freaked me out right there because like today's Wednesday and like you made me think like wait, is it only Monday? That was like legitimate the most terrified I've been in a while. Yeah, it's Wednesday, my dudes. Ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum bum bum. All right, the post is live. Do me a favor, go give it some love. And we're going to be getting started here shortly. Hello, IA. Bum, 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 bum. Pion, thank you for the 4 months. Let me grab today's artwork and we should be good to go. Hmm. There we go. Hello, John. I was trying to get the YouTube chat working and it just was not. Okay, there we go. All right, let's get this party started. Hello again, everybody. How you guys doing today? We have a lot of stuff to go over, so we're going to try to get right into it. But in the meantime, here is the artwork for today. So do yourself a favor and go give the artists some love. It is a fantastically wholesome piece. I love the art. I love the art too. It's really good. Bob was the one that found it for me today, so I got to give him props for that. Again, we are going to be going over the new Samurai Remnant units and then trying to complete banner review, though sadly I still don't think we'll get done today. I do think maybe by Thursday we might. I'm really glad on the schedule that I built in the extra days for banner review, because it is pretty clearly coming back to bite me in the butt. Chat, you still have a couple more Barbados. I'm actually going to go ahead and just yeet my AP into Barbados for that. The event shouldn't be too bad for me otherwise. I'm not really worried about it. I have full efficiency of drop bonus as long as I get to a good point. That should be good. But we're basically just going to keep doing it real quick here to spin down the AP on an A. Again, it is still up though if you guys want to get some more clears of it, so there's always that there for you. Like I said, I haven't really touched it too much, and that's just purely because I have no need. Cad, please save me from the idiot saying Ushi Gozen is bad. Ushi Gozen is not bad. I will say there is some concerns with her kit, but I think there's some good points to be made about that and why. Threw 2 yellow souls today and got Yui. Nice, congrats. Barbados ends tonight. Yeah, it'll probably be done sometime in the morning. Hey, Hype Train General, what's up, buddy? Thank you for the 53. Appreciate it. She's quick, enough said. Yeah, I mean, I think that's why a lot of people are going to be down on her, but just because the unit's quick does not mean they're bad. Do you think that there could be a farming comp for Gozen involving Yui, or is that more of a challenge comp type setup? I think that's one of the big points I'll end up making about Yui tonight, is that it's really weird that she's an art support, but you know, besides that, like, could you use the two of them together? Yes, I guess. You just wouldn't get a lot of benefit out of it. And that's kind of the issue that I have with it. I do think the SR is borked. Okay, give me a minute. Usually when it's borked, it's just reboot it. There you go. Yeah, you go arts. Yeah, like I'm gonna say this. They're getting into dangerous territory with arts where there's too many options and thus you need like practically none of them, right? It's always nice to have more options, but yeah, I don't think Yui's a gotta have. I like in that regard, I think Yui is a interesting unit, but she is the epitome of a unit that, like, if you have all the other units released to date, like she offers nothing that like you didn't already have, right? CAD setup inspired me. I beat Barbados in 1 to 2 turns. Nice, congrats. I just I have like, so Estrella is damage bonus in this event, and I have an NP5. I was actually doing this without Black Grail before, but it had the chance to low roll, and I was just like, I'd rather just, you know, press the buttons and have it never happen. All right, I gotta turn that down just a tad. It's really loud. They want people to stop using Castoria and spend money on someone else. Yeah, it's not gonna happen. It's like, here's the thing, chat. Okay, I've talked about how you want to be bond efficient, right? But at the end of the day, think about like how much quartz you spent on Castoria. Maybe you got lucky, right? Like maybe you ticketed her. But you know, if you just sit there and think about that, and you think about like, you know, the on average, it was maybe somewhere in the like 270 to like 300 range of quartz, right? So let's just, take 300 courts just to be somewhat fair and generous, right? At 300 courts, you have to think about how efficient you would be using a different unit other than Castoria versus using Castoria at like bond 15 throughout it. How long would it take you using another unit to equate rolling basically the equivalent of another character, that 300 courts, right? Like, how long versus just continuing to use Castoria? That's why it's a losing proposition for the devs. It's not a good take from their part. People will just sit there and they will continue to use a bond 15 unit. It's not going to be efficient for them, but it's not going to be that bad. And I think that's the issue that they run into is like when they have no other option, they're just going to keep using the units they do have. They're not going to roll simply to get themselves out of a bad bond situation. She stole 300 from me. Yeah. I'm going to keep using her even if she's bond 15. She's too good. Yeah, I mean, like, I try not to, right? Like, I have her bond 15 on JP, and if I don't have to use Castoria, I don't. But if I have to, I will. Like it's just that simple. Like, if Castoria is the sane solution to the node, and like none of the other comps, quick or buster, work, and I can't really jerry rig something to work as like arts without Castoria, I'm just gonna use Castoria and I'm not gonna like mind it. That is what that is, right? Like, and that can easily be the case in a situation where maybe the unit that you need is not like the best unit, right? So like basically maybe you either don't have them or you don't have them at a high enough NP level, and so you have to use some sort of alternative, and thus because you're having to use an alternative, whatever the dominant card type you were going to use with that unit doesn't work, and you're stuck with like, oh well, I have an NP5 alternative that's like arts, so now you're stuck with arts, right? Like, that's where you're going to find yourself in those situations from time to time, and you're just going to use Castoria. Like, that is what that is. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So it's like, I don't think the devs' take on Bond is going to work out for them in the end. They can release equivalents, but I'm going to be real with y'all. The only thing that will get people to roll for a Castoria equivalent is by making a Castoria non-equivalent, by making a new version that is even better. Like, they have to come out with a new unit that is better than Castoria to get people to roll again. That's the only way. Welcome to power creep in a gacha game. That is why it happens. They usually slowly increase power creep over time in order to make sure that people actually like have reasons to roll. And I don't think there's any issue with that so long as the power creep isn't happening too fast, right? But yeah, I mean, like, you look at how strong Castoria is already, and you start thinking about what would that mean then if they released a unit that's more powerful than Castoria? Because it can't just be, well, it's Castoria, 1.1, right? Like, it can't be Castoria exactly, but now she gives like 30% attack up instead of 20% with her skill. That's not good enough, right? Like, it literally has to be a significantly stronger version to get people to pull out the wallet. And that's the problem. I think they know this. And I think, I hate to say it, it's a bass-ackwards way of looking at the issue, right? They are trying to treat the result, not the cause. They're trying to go and say, well, how do we make more money? I know will stop them from being able to bond the units that they love. That doesn't work, right? Like, hey, we'll get them to roll a new unit. That'll make us more money. It's not going to work because all you're doing is pissing off the player at that point, and they're eventually just going to say no. And you're going to lose that entire player. And when you lose that entire player, you never make another dollar off them. This goes back to the age-old philosophy in game making of what's better, chat? To have a game that looks good or a game that plays good? Always better to have the latter. You're always going to be better to have a game that is a good game rather than a game that looks good. Okay? And that doesn't quite apply here, but what I'm trying to draw the analogy to is you will get further with your player base by fixing the problems with this game rather than trying to limit your player base. The more you attempt to squeeze, the more they're going to slip through. So, it is what it is. What you're saying is to release Abe no Seimei Savior quick. In a weird way, yes. Right? Like, you start looking at like, oh, well, why do people act the way they do towards quick units? Because you haven't fixed quick. That is the reason. So it's like, if you fix quick, you won't have that issue. Optics matter? Yeah. Look, I understand that, but also if you're trying to make the argument that the way a game looks really does matter, to a degree, yes, but not nearly as much as anyone actually realizes. And the example for this is simply Minecraft. Chat, like, the most popular game of all time is basically the, like, shittiest game of all time in terms of graphics. It's not the graphics that matter, it's the gameplay. The gameplay is what keeps you playing. You don't sit there repeatedly staring at the beautiful piece of artwork that is the crap game in front of you, right? So it is what it is. I mean, the same thing. Like, you can look all the way back at like something like Tetris. Tetris doesn't have good graphics. People still keep playing it. Just talking about how players see the game. Yeah. If that's what you mean, like the actual optics of how people perceive the dev actions and stuff like that. Yes, I do agree. It does matter. But I'm gonna say this. I don't want to get into this too much, but we've had some issues on the server lately with some drama going on. I think a large part of that is due to people stoking the flames, people putting words in the mod's mouth, people trying to basically make situations worse. And that's kind of the same thing I think that's happening with FGO. I think it's fair to criticize the devs when the devs fuck something up. I think it's fair to point out issues with the game. But you have to be constructive with it. You have to be fair. If you're not, you lose all semblance of, like, really any, like, morality or any, like, honorable standing at that point. So it's like, no one should take you seriously. Sadly, we live in a world where I think people still take people seriously that, have no ethics, and that is what that is. But we shouldn't. We should demand a little bit better out of people, because that, like, again, I'm not going to say that we all need to, like, go patrol ourselves and stuff like that, but it's just one of those things where it's like, you shouldn't listen to the person that you know is lying on things. You shouldn't listen to the person that you know doesn't know something. And that still largely holds true for both the server situation and FGO. At the end of the day, like I said, we were talking about this on Twitter today, but and then even in Discord, but it's like everyone's peeved about the Jalter situation. I talked about it yesterday. You guys know my stance on this. The issue isn't Jalter. Never has been. Jalter's just like the lightning rod that people want to rally around. But it's the greater issue that matters. It's the fact that there's no animation updates. Why is there no animation updates? I don't know. Good question. We probably should demand an answer out of the devs at this point on it. It's been 2 years. Like, at least tell us why you're not doing them anymore. But it is what it is, right? Well, people think that complaints doesn't need arguments. No, I mean, I'm okay with people discussing things and getting in an argument, right? Like, I understand disagreements happen. Just in usual, you have to be civil about it, right? People talk in Discord? Yeah, people talk all the time in Discord. Rin fans always sad. No. Graphics only matter up to the point where I can look at it without being repulsed. Yeah, I think that's and it's less about graphics than at that point, more about like style and like the type of style that you chose for your game. I think that matters. For instance, I won't play Binding of Isaac because the game is just disgusting. And like it actually it's not like artistically it's the ugliest game ever. It's like the style of the game is ugly as shit to me, and that's why I don't want to play it. Bad take? Too bad. Deal with it. It is what it is. But I also understand that I'm not the only person that feels that way, nor am I expecting everybody to feel the same as me. I understand plenty of people love that game. But yeah, I absolutely won't touch Binding of Isaac because the game is disgusting to me. So it is what it is. It's a gross game, and that's the point. Yeah. But see, and this is where, like, sometimes when you go with a highly stylized, like kind of art direction like that, it's gonna be polarizing. It's gonna be hit or miss. People are either gonna love it or hate it, right? It just happens. In the same way, it's like we can look at like we can look at something like Minecraft and say, like, well, why did Minecraft get made with potato graphics? Why didn't they make, the Crisis of building games, right? And the reason they didn't is because of, engine constraints and stuff like that. There's usually a reason why game graphics end up the way that they do. I feel that way about the old Mega Man games just because I don't really like side scrollers, even though it is a really good game. Yeah, I think it's fine, right? Like, as I think everybody's entitled to their own opinion. People don't have to agree with it, right? But as long as, again, like, everybody can be respectful about it. Like, you're not going to see me sit there and shit on The Binding of Isaac and be like, oh, because I don't like the graphics, I think it's a trash game or something like that. I'm just going to say, I don't like it. And that is my opinion. And that's perfectly fine. And you do not have to agree with it. Instead of trying to be like, oh, it's a fact that it's a trash game, right? I think that's the annoying thing that people do nowadays, is they basically, like, set up a hill and go die on it. And it's like, people really need to be a little bit more considerate about how they're, like, handling things. Mega Man isn't the biggest of the big. What do you mean? I much prefer more stylized or shell shading stuff. I actually do really like the cell shading stuff. A lot of them feel boring and generic to me, and I don't really want to try them. I find a lot of my interest in games is either the type of the game that it is or the IP that the game surrounds. Like, if it's an IP that I like, then I'm going to be more likely to be interested. And if it's a style of game that I like, I'm going to be more likely to be interested. It wasn't that bad. Oh man, them's fighting words with some people in the community, Kiesel. I agree with you though. Like, I started with Dean Stay Night, so I'm somebody that, like, isn't repulsed by it. I personally don't enjoy Baldur's Gate 3. How dare you not like Game of the Year Baldur's Gate 3? No, it's fine. Right? Like, and I've said this before too. It's like, I perfectly understand that, like, turn-based isn't for everybody in the same way that action combat isn't for everybody. And the only thing that ever pisses me off about that is when I see someone go like, this game should cater to me. It needs to change the way that it is. It needs to absolutely have like, oh, I don't like turn-based. It needs to have action combat. Or, oh, I don't like action. It needs to have turn-based combat. It's like, no. It's just, you want a different game. That's all it is. Like, again, it'd be like me demanding that The Binding of Isaac not have that animation style. Cool, then I don't want The Binding of Isaac, right? Like, so it's always a weird take for me to see that sort of thing out of people. God, Cat, let's not go there. It's fine. Like I said, I'm not. I'm a pretty reasonable person on a lot of things, and I think you'll find too. As long as you can have a respectful conversation with me, I can talk to you about anything. But the second people get disrespectful, I'd stop wanting to talk with them. Gamed in. Thank you for the 18 months. How are you doing, buddy? I've never played F-Zero. But I am hoping that we finally get some Metroid news soon. I love playing Monster Hunter games. Yeah, and like, okay, so I've talked about my misgivings of the Monster Hunter genre and like what I don't like about it. And I didn't like hate Monster Hunter, right? I know and acknowledge that I had a bad experience with the people that I was playing with, but it's left enough of a bad taste in my mouth that I don't really want to go back for the time being. We'll see. Maybe with something like Monster Hunter Wilds, I'll be a little bit more interested, right? But yeah, I think that is kind of how it is. The constant Metroid player. Listen, I love the Metroid series in that regard. Like, I do think the older games are probably a little bit harder now, at least compared to like Dread and what I played, but I'd love to go back and play some others. I used to really love action combat when I was 16 and younger, but one day I woke up and started craving strategy games and stopped any action games as a whole. So weird. So I can probably tell you why. At some point, you kind of got smart, okay? And chat, please don't take this the wrong way. I'm not calling everybody that likes an action game a, caveman, okay? But I think there's definitely an intellect level required to play strategy games. And it's something that I've definitely noticed is that like a lot of action games nowadays have no strategy to them, guys. Like let's be honest. A lot of the action games are like, all right, pick this. It's the best setup, the best weapon, the best kit, whatever, right? Like you take this, you run with it, and it all comes down to like reaction time and button mashing. That's it. There is no thought whatsoever going through your brain the majority of the time. And that's fine. Some people like that to be able to turn their brain off. But sometimes that gets boring for people, myself included. Like that is my ultimate criticism of action games is that they just don't try to make you think ever. And they can be fun in spurts, but after a while I get incredibly bored with them if there's not something else to entertain me. So I think that's probably what happened to you is one day you woke up and you realized that you craved something that made you think. And that's what led you to strategy games. Because I'm the same way. I love strategy games because of it. You see the Yozora fight in Kingdom Hearts 3? No. So besides Jolter, what other servants do you think could use an animation update? I feel like OG Reiko could use one. Yeah, I'd actually really like to see OG Reiko get one. I'm not someone that's sat there and like gone through the list of all the units that have and haven't had one. I just know there are several that still haven't to this day. And again, like I want to point this out, right, to everybody that's raging about Jolter, just so you guys are aware, so that you don't stick your foot in your mouth even more. Jolter has had a like partial animation update. They updated both her and John to give them new animations for how they wield their flags. That was the thing that happened years ago. So that has already been a thing. It's not a full animation update. I get that. But like, please understand, the argument that Jolter's the one that needs it the most is factually incorrect. It actually is. Like, because we could sit to it and point to it and say it is not the oldest set of animations. In fact, like I said, I still remember people complaining that Jolter and her animations lagged out their phone because of how robust they were with the fire effects. But, again, like I understand she's a very popular character, and I agree. I would love to see her get an animation update. But like I said, I think to me the biggest issue as a whole is just the fact that, like, I don't care when they do the Jolter animation update. I just care that they start doing the animation updates again, because when they start doing them again, Jolter will inevitably get one. But until they start doing them again, you're not getting them. Period. So it's like, there's no sense getting upset about Jolter because you're not going to get Jolter and you're not going to get anyone else. Like, I think this is the point that sadly the community is having to come to grips with. I think this is an issue that we've noticed for a while. I've talked with Trubs about this numerous times. And I think at the end of the day, the community is finally getting this thrown in their faces. Like the greater Fate Go community is getting it thrown in their face that, yeah, the devs have been fucking up. They have not been doing the things that the community expects them to. And so that's where this is really like hard hitting at the moment, is because the community is having to come to grips with the fact that they should not have expected anything here. And they don't like that that they have to come to grips with that. Mr. Leo, thank you for the 38. I hear Jolter when I get in. What's up, buddy? How's it been? How's your travels been? Would you rather they just release more servants and faster story, or have animation updates? Ooh, more servants? No. Faster story? Yes. Like, this is a weird one. Like, I think their rate on servants is fine. I don't really have too much of an issue with that. I think the only issue that we had back in the day was that they weren't ever releasing low star units, and I think they've gotten better with that. But like, it's not the rate of the servants, it's maybe the staleness of the servants that I would have issue with in some degrees. And I'd still point out that, to me, I think it's more about like them actually, you know, getting the ball rolling on story and actually managing to hey, hold on, chat. I think I have enough to buy a C. I still don't have enough to buy a C. SMH my head. But I think that's the biggest issue, is the pacing of the story is really bad. They're not moving on from Lost Belt. They absolutely need to. And it's funny because I keep going back to the original Nasu comments of like, you know, maybe when all of this is said and done, you're gonna beg us to finish. And I'm getting there, chat. I'm getting there. Like, I'm beginning to beg them to, like, please just end the story so that you can start something else. I love FGO, but I think as someone that loves this game, it hurts to just sit here and watch it like happen like this. Like, I don't want to watch FGO slowly die by 1,000 cuts. I want to see this game and this IP prosper like it has used to. And I really want to see them bring the energy and the excitement back to Fate that I think has been gone from it for a while now. We shouldn't have expected buffs either, right? I think at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, like, to a degree, we should expect these things, only because, like, we should demand a little bit better out of the devs. We should demand things that were normal staples of the game in prior years. But, you know, the cynic in me says, no, you shouldn't have expected it, because they just aren't doing anything that much right now. Question: the update coming to NA with the Saint Quartz and or Rare Prism for Max Ascension, where does Angry Mango fall? Ooh, it's a good question. He's technically an FP unit, but I don't know. I actually have no idea off the top of my head. I'm sure there's some way to look it up, but off the top of my head, that is escaping me. Because I've already, you know, leveled up my Mango. In short, fuck single. I mean, I was on Twitter. I had that post today, and Maximizing, if you guys know him, he's another occasionally FGO content creator. But he was pointing out the fact, because I said, like, it's been almost 2 years since our last animation update. Chat, the last animation update that NA will ever receive to this point is in Tesla Fest. It's the update to Tesla. After that, the only other thing you guys get is a sort of palette swap change to Summer BB's NP, where it will actually show the Ascension form that she's in her NP, which isn't really an animation update. So the last true animation update you get is to Tesla during Tesla Fest 2 months from now. Okay? That's it. And at the end of the day, we're up to date with JP's animation updates. Oh, okay. So there you go. So if we already have the Tesla one, then we already have the last one. So NA has even longer. Okay. Basically, at that point, then if that's the case, you are already at the point where you will not get any further animation updates. And that sucks. Right? But I don't know. Right? Like, trying to get the DBZ problem story was, yeah. I've heard that too many times with too many games. I know. Kat, do you think they should release a new Mordred where that is other than an alter or a new Mordred face? Um, I wouldn't mind more Mordred. I don't have issue with more Mordred lore or anything like that. I honestly, I think out of all of them, the one I want to see is not an altar chat because I don't think altar really makes sense for Mordred. Mordred kind of in a weird way already is an altar. Um, I want to see, like a Mordred berserker. I want to see a Mordred just going completely unhinged. Whoops. Wasn't there an animation update for mobs at some point? Maybe, right? Like, I don't remember. Did you roll or gonna skip? I will probably not be rolling, but only because, like, courts is the issue. Revelator, thank you for the prime. Appreciate it. How are you doing? Welcome to the channel. Enjoy your emotes. Isn't she usually unhinged? Yeah, but I want to see her go even crazier, right? Because that is what being a berserker does to you. Love your content. Thank you. Appreciate it. Rongo Mordred Lancer, Big Booba. I actually, like, I know people want that for the sexiness, but I would not appreciate that. That would be a bastardization of a lot of the lore at that point. I'm not going to say that they couldn't write that. Nasu can, because Nasu's already proven that he can bastardize anything he wants. But I would not be the biggest fan of that at that point. Yeah, no, I think at this point, like, I try to be fair to Lasingle, but I'm in Leo's camp on this. Like, I don't trust the devs anymore, chat. Like, I want to be clear on this. Oh, right. Sorry. I remembered the point that I was going to make. Okay. So, the point that I was making is that, again, we hadn't had an animation update in 2 years, basically, at this point. Chat, December of 2021. Does that date ring a bell to you guys? December of 2021. Last time we had buffs? No. The date that the Delightworks acquisition was announced by Aniplex. And by February of 2022, we had Lasingle then at that point, the split off game division from actual Delightworks at that point. Basically now fully formed as a separate entity from Delightworks under Aniplex's umbrella. So by February, the transition was complete. That is February of this current year on NA. Okay, it'll have been 2 years in February. After that point, only in March, Tesla Fest, did you get another animation update. It's entirely likely that that animation update was in the works already prior to the acquisition, and thus it was allowed to be completed. So, that's a concerning pattern. Yeah. I hate to point the finger, but it definitely appears like the transition under Aniplex has resulted in there being no animation updates. Almost as if they said, you don't have the manpower for this. You're going to cut all non-essential stuff. This doesn't get us, maybe it is a money thing. Maybe they go like, hey, this doesn't make us money, so why are you bothering with it? I don't know, right? But at the end of the day, I'm just going to keep taking that, looking at that objectively and saying, yes, it is entirely possible that this is Aniplex's issue, that it is their fault. I don't know. We'll never know. And I'm not going to say that it is the case because this is conjecture on my part. We might never find out the answer of who's responsible in that regard. But man, I would love to be able to sit down and, just pick the brain of someone who did know. Maybe even Albert or something like that. I would love to sit there and just ask them some questions of like, hey, you know, how much sway does Aniplex have in the decision making of running the game? What is going on behind the scenes, especially on the JP side of things? Because Albert's largely an A and stuff like that, but you have to assume that Albert at least knows some of the goings on the JP side of things, some of the hierarchy and how things work. And that's something that we really don't have at the current point on really to our knowledge, right? Like we can guess, but that's it. So but yeah, like I really do wonder, did Aniplex just convert FGO into a cash cow and nothing more? It is just a money printer that is meant to subsist until the community gives up on it, right? And I hope that's not the case, but I really do wonder at this point. Reward them with an obnoxious amount of money, regardless of how dead the content for the game is. I mean, Chad, I can still look at something like, say, Genshin and say that their events are usually crap. They can be completed in, like, an hour's worth of time in a lot of circumstances and stuff like that. So I don't know that it's really like that big of a deal to say that FGO doesn't have a lot of content now. I think it's more that as we look towards the past and how FGO used to be run, how FGO used to produce content, that nowadays FGO seemingly is producing a lot less, right? Like compared to its past, comparatively here, FGO is producing way less content than it used to. Compared to other games, I don't know. Like I feel like FGO still pumps out the content at least at certain points, but I think I can certainly look towards at least the story release, the main attraction to this game, in my opinion, right? But I think I can at least look to the story release and say that I feel like that level of content pacing of like basically a main chapter a year, I don't think that would be accepted in any live service game. I think that would be way too long. So, but it is what it is, right? Then there's the I can't answer that BS. I mean, you can't blame the guy for protecting his job at that point, right? But it's like that's all a hypothetical what if situation if I ever got to interview someone. But yeah, no, I would love to have a sit down, even privately with one of the devs. Is Aniplex still a Sony subsidiary? Yes. The priorities have definitely changed. I do agree with that. I feel like they've transitioned into more of a like late life live service game, which is kind of wild because I had this thought a day or so ago about like chat. I've been playing Conan. Conan's a game that came out in 2016, I think, so it's like 8 years old at this point, right? But that game has gotten so much better compared to where it originally launched. And in that regard, I think it's still a really solid game. And so the thought that came to me is that like you have a lot of these live service games that kind of keep getting updated over the years, and usually by the end of their life cycle, these games are actually very good, right? They have all this extra quality of life that they didn't used to have. They're in a much better spot. So it's almost like rather than playing the live service game when it comes out, you should actually be playing the live service game before it gets shut down. But yeah, I find it really interesting to see, and I think FGO is a weird case where the game is certainly getting better, but the pacing for everybody that is playing it actively is getting progressively worse. AK content pacing isn't all that crazy. So like how often do you end up getting like a story release in Arknights? Event after event. Yeah, that is kind of what I've heard from some people is that like the pacing of some of the other games just gets overwhelming because they just keep throwing too much shit at you. But the decision making and planning. Oh yeah, I'd like to see that, Leo. You get Avenger Raiko? I did not. We have not chosen to roll. 4 to 6 months. Yeah, I mean, like, and I'm gonna say this because I've talked about this before, and I've had people be like, "Well, Cad, you claim that you're not getting major story releases, but once a year. But what do you call the point five stuff, like Trom and uh, was it Hell Mandala or whatever it is? So it's like, Hey and Kyo, sorry. So it's like, yeah, I definitely feel you guys on that, but please understand, I have a weird take on this. The reason that I don't view that as a main story chapter goes all the way back to the origins of the point five events. Chat, what was the first point five event that you guys ever got in FGO? Oku? Yeah, Oku was 3.5. Prior to that point, there were no point five events, which leads me to making this bold statement. I do not believe the point five events were ever meant to be main story. I believe the point five events were always meant to be this sort of like tangential story. Because if you remember when Oku came out, it was not labeled 3.5. It was branded 3.5 after the fact, when the devs decided to rebrand. So I think what happened is you had the original developer plan for each story release. Okay? And that was their original concept. And then I think what happened is they originally had events planned in between that were tangential to the story, that were not like necessarily a bridge between each chapter so much as just a like, hey, we want to also tell this side story. Okay. I think at some point they determined that they needed to really stretch out the life cycle of Lost Belt for whatever reason. I've had numerous theories as to why that is the case, including the busyness overall of Nasu as well as his own burnout. And so I think at that point they decided to instead rebrand them all as point five. That is to say, a story release chapter in the interim, so that they could basically manage to, drag this out. Okay? I think that's what they opted to do, is they opted to make the claim of these are now main story when their original intent was not to be so. Okay, and we can kind of further see that with what they determined to be a main interlude, then the evolution of that term and kind of where it is now is even more confusing, right? So it's like, chat, what is a main interlude? Because no matter the answer you tell me, the answer is theoretically wrong because there's another answer. And that's what's weird about it. So it's not that stuff like Oku or Imaginary Scramble or hell, even Trom were never planned. They were planned to be in story form, and I think they got developed into more as a result to help them pad the progression of the story out, to give them a lot longer time to stall, that sort of thing. So that's my honest to God take on it. And that's why I say, like, really the reality here is you get a event like Imaginary Scramble, chat. You get an event like Oku. Heck, you even get 5.5. Think about how you went through all of those stories and ask yourself this. Did any of those stories actually progress the main plot line? Some of you could make an argument as to maybe yes, right? Like, for instance, in 5.5, we end up sort of resolving the situation with a certain antagonist, right? But no, it didn't. Even 5.5 didn't actually deal with the main storyline. They're all tangents. We could have easily skipped 5.5. That story could have never been written, and it would not have impacted the main story in any way other than a certain somebody would have disappeared out of the main story at that point. That's it. That's it. Right? So, kind of interesting to see that it is still a tangent no matter what. And it doesn't mean that they didn't try to tie it back in as much as they could. I definitely think they did. But there you go. Kind of interesting to see that, like, yes, what actually matters here is the resolution of each individual lost belt and how that advances our knowledge of the foreign god and what we plan to do about them. It is only that. That is the only real main story thread. And as a result, the fact that that has been creeping along is what has made FGO feel like it is creeping along. So you have to sit there and look at that and realize that is kind of our issue at this point, right? It's only with the actual main story chapters does the game's plot actually progress. The 0.5 is the story of how a character gets written out. Yeah, I mean, in a weird way, right? Like, and I'm not trying to like bash the 0.5 events or say that I don't like them or anything like that, right? I'm just trying to point out the fact that they are stall. They are tangential stories. They are side stories, is what they are. And I know people don't want to hear that, right? Like, I've had this talk with Trubs before, and I've said Tunguska is a side story. He does not like to hear that. I understand. But yeah, it's the exact same way, right? Like, you could basically take one look at Tunguska and say it is entirely possible that like you would go straight to the next Lost Belt without having read Tunguska and not have missed anything other than where did that character go? That's it. That's the only change. They would have needed another intro to Ibuki for Tunguska. Potentially, yeah. But in that regard, then the 0.5s are connected, not the main storyline, huh? That's intriguing. Almost like the plot lines for the 0.5 stuff were developed later. So you see what I'm saying, right? I don't know. But I really do feel like that's what's going on with this. Be a king, only read story to understand the memes. Nah, like, chat, I love the story. Like, I highly recommend y'all read all the 0.5s, y'all do all the ordeal calls, y'all do all the Epic of Remnants, yada, 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 right? Like, but at the end of the day, I really do feel like that's what they did with the 0.5 events, is they were originally supposed to be side stories in event form, and they got developed into much more fleshed out interim like pit stops, if you will, between the Lost Belts in order to allow them to go longer between releasing actual Lost Belts, in order to allow them to stretch the story out, in order to give basically Nasu more time before he had to actually sit down and hard theory craft new parts of the story, right? That's I think where it all kind of boils down to. But it's just a game theory at this point. Like I said, I don't know. We'll find that out in the long term. But yeah, I'd say over time that theory has not been disproven and has in fact been more proven, as Ordeal Call is an extension of Lost Belt. It is not an end to the part. So it definitely appears like we are in a stalling pattern. Also, we're still at this point, chat, of when is Ordeal Call 2? Anyone know? It's in spring, yeah. So it's like, I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine, but like, yeah, they really don't want to like get nailed down on when the next chapter releases anymore. Soon, TM. Yep. Okay, chat. Let's talk new units. God, dude, every single day I get so many like Twitch DMs from like OnlyFans solicitors. It's wild. Reminds me of spring for class core system. Yeah, when did we get it, chat? Was it June? So we'll see. But June 21st, 2024 for a deal call too. Yeah, I mean, like that'll be kind of rough. What do you think FGO needs to bring back the fire? Ooh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that question until now, Farkas. I could fix this game. I actually could fix this game. I think the issue for why it's not getting fixed has a lot to do with like basically who's controlling the reins. I think it's due to various issues. So here's how I would fix FGO. And this is going off of assumptions for what I perceive to be the problems with the game. Okay. Step number 1, I would hire more people. That is not an easy thing. So how do I do this? Well, I look at the industry standard pay rate and I ask myself, are we hitting that? If we are hitting that, why are we not able to hire more people? Well, then there must be some sort of like external factor going on there, or maybe even it's an internal one, like perhaps that we're losing more people faster than we can hire them, or perhaps it's just a case of we can't actually put the bodies in the seats because we can't get anyone to check out our company because we have a bad reputation. In either of those circumstances, one of the best solutions to this is pay your workers more money. So I basically at that point end up saying, all right, everybody's getting raises, everybody's getting increased bump ups in salaries because we are a billion-dollar game. We have no right to pay our workers like shit at this point. So we're going to start paying you like we basically appreciate you and help resolve that issue. Then when we go back to hiring, we don't have to worry about the fact that we're going to be paying the new guy more than the guy that has been working there for like, again, like 8 years or something like that. So that's going to help out with the hiring practices. You're going to get more people as you're now offering over the competitive rate, and that should put bodies in the chairs. So with that situation resolved, you now have the people to actually work. So what do I do for step 2? Step 2 is I make sure that those hires are actually animation department people, and I definitely start pumping out things like Live 2D. That'll get a lot of eyes back on FGO. I start pumping out things like new skins, maybe even monetizing them if I need even more money. And I basically start pumping out things like animation updates again as well. So therefore, you're actually getting people to actually do what they need. From there, then we start doing a hard pass on the actual balance of the game. This is also going to help us make more money, as basically we're going to start revamping our old units. We're going to completely redo old units that just suck ass like Jekyll and Hyde. And then from there, we're also going to end up basically at least giving the much needed buffs that is causing several of these units to fall behind. So we're going to start doing wide sweeping balance changes, including basically just vast hordes and swaths of strengthening updates. We're going to do that. That should get people on a much more level playing field and eliminate a lot of the power creep inflation that's been going on over the years. From there, then we basically come back here for step 4 and we start taking a look at what quality of life that the game actually needs. Again, this could actually happen in any of the prior earlier steps, as you should have a team devoted to this wholly and separately. So at that point, you start looking at things like, why is the FP rolling as shit as it is? You start looking at things like that the community wants and maybe needs to actually have go a little bit better to improve like their life and time spent playing the game. As long as you can manage to do things like this is always going to be a win in the player's book. And then from there, we start looking at both how we handle banner balance and basically like desirability of units going forward. Okay. Alongside this, you're probably having the writers at this point also look at the overall pacing of story, because now that you have enough people, the bottleneck should no longer be on the developer side of things and should instead be on the side of the writers and how fast they can actually produce the new story. So again, do all of that. You basically get FGO back to ticking at its year 3 pace, where things are basically going at lightning speed again. Not too much that everyone's burning out, but enough that you have a nice balance between there is content when you want content, there is downtime when you want downtime, there is story every couple of months, so that you have the capability of maintaining an interest and continuing to play the game that you love. That's it. It is literally that easy. So here's the thing. I'm not a game dev, chat. The game devs are. They do that for a living. The game devs can think of this. Game devs absolutely know how to fix these problems. Why aren't they? That's the question y'all got to ask yourself. It doesn't sound that easy. It's pretty easy, actually. You should have recorded that. I don't think it's that hard to actually fix FGO. I'm sorry. I will probably not do a Florida Man story time today, Ken. It's the management always has been. Yeah, like, so for instance, the very key crux there was like, you just don't have enough bodies, right? And why didn't you have enough bodies? Well, probably a money issue. And now's the part where you start asking yourself, how does the billion-dollar game have a money issue? Is it that they're losing money? The answer to this is no. They're not losing any money. This game still makes crazy amounts of money. That someone's taking all the money. Who's taking all the money? Why is the money not getting invested back into the Lightworks? Sorry, Lasengle. Well, maybe it's Papa Sony and its shareholders. Maybe it's Aniplex trying to fund its other, like holdings and stuff like that. I don't know. I don't care. All I know is that it's a problem at this point. They're treating it like a cash cow. They're not investing enough money back into it. So this cash cow is going to continue to stop like making as much money as it did in prior years. It will slowly make less and less as it slowly bleeds out players until they slowly fix the game. That's it. That's simple. Okay. Like I said, the fixes to FGO are simple, chat. They really are. The hard part is actually getting people to make the changes. There's always some reason as to why you don't. Random question, what is the Doge attack thing supposed to do? It's supposed to actually get some attacks like on Aurelia, but it's like not happening, and I don't know why. I have to look at that, so I'm sorry for that in advance. Cow's gonna die from too much milking, gonna rip the udders off. Pretty much, right? That's usually where a disconnect between the people who know what they're doing and the people who don't. Yeah, chat. Okay, so I want all of you. Let's stop. Let's take 1 second here because I want all of you to see this tweet. All of you. I think everybody needs to basically read this, okay? So, if you don't know who this guy is, you should. So, this is Sven Vink. Or Vinke, I have no idea how you say his name. This is the lead director of Larian Studios, aka the studios that just produced Baldur's Gate 3, the shocking sudden game of the year. He's 100% right here. So basically this is talking about the Ubisoft bullshit and how, I guess, their subscription sort of their like lead subscription guy, the director of subscriptions at Ubisoft, came out and said that gamers need to get comfortable with not owning their games because of subscriptions. Well, again, I've seen numerous like responses to this, including crap like, oh, then Ubisoft needs to get used to people not purchasing their games, which I think is great. And again, the classic age-old meme of, if buying games is not owning them, then stealing games is not pirating them. Or pirating games is not stealing them, rather. So it's like, yeah. Anyways. One comes out and says, whatever the future of games looks like, content will always be king. But it's going to be a lot harder to get good content if subscriptions become the dominant model and a select group gets to decide what goes to market and what not. Direct from developer to players is the way. So Swen is basically 100% refuting that idiot's take, saying that Yes, if all you do is subscriptions, if that becomes dominant, it's going to turn gaming into trash. It is going to make it so that good games stop getting made, and you basically just have everything funneling into this subscription mindset that ultimately is disconnected from the actual consumer base. He further goes on to say that getting a board to okay a project fueled by idealism is almost impossible, and idealism needs room to exist, even if it can lead to disaster. Subscription models will always end up being cost-benefit analysis exercises intended to maximize profits. So what he's trying to say here, okay, is that basically video games are an art form. You need that idealism. You need the sort of passion behind the project in order to do it, rather than just turning into a purely corporate driven, pile of slop. It says there's nothing wrong with that, but it may not become a monopoly of subscription services. We are already all dependent on a select group of digital distribution platforms, and discoverability is brutal. So he's talking about video games getting discovered. Should those platforms all switch to subscription, it'll become savage. I agree with him. So Swin is coming from this at a point where, again, he's the lead director of Larian Studios. Prior to Baldur's Gate 3, the thing they were known for was Divinity Original Sin 2. It was actually their sort of breakout title, and it was really popular as well, just not as pervasive as, again, Baldur's Gate was, because it didn't have the, IP behind it, basically, with Dungeons and Dragons. Here's the thing. Do you know what they made before Divinity Original Sin 2? They made Divinity Original Sin 1. That not nearly as many people played. So he is speaking from experience on this, that discoverability is brutal. Getting people to actually find your new IP, your new game, is really rough if you don't have sort of the means to market it and put it in front of a lot of eyes. And that's usually going to cost money. Okay. So he's saying it's already bad as is. You put it in a subscription only model, good luck. In such a world, by definition, the preference of the subscription service will determine what games get made. Trust me, you really don't want that. And here's the part that I wanted all of you to read. TLDR, you won't find our games on a subscription service. Even if I respect that for many developers, it presents an opportunity to make their game. That's been the big thing that people have said with like Xbox Game Pass and stuff like that, that without the funding that they get from that, they would have no capability to make their game. So he's not saying that subscription models don't have a place in gaming. He's saying it should not become the dominant model that replaces everything, and that doing so actually causes huge problems. So again, he says that for many developers, it presents an opportunity to make their game. I don't have an issue with that. I just want to make sure the other ecosystem doesn't die because it's valuable. That's the thing y'all got to understand. It is important to make sure that we don't go all to that one sort of thing there, right? So again, you don't want everything to turn into this battle pass subscription model bullshit. Okay? That is right. Yeah, I agree. And it's funny because you got people down here that are basically disagreeing with him. But no, I mean, this is absolutely the truth. I think that this guy saying that gamers need to get comfortable not owning their games is the height of stupidity, and it's exactly why we are in the situation that we're in, where so many game devs at this point feel so attacked by the community. Okay, but the reason I wanted you guys to see this, the reason I wanted you to hear Swin's words here, is so that you understand the problem isn't the developers. The developers usually are gamers too. They usually are right there playing the same games alongside you guys, having fun and wanting to enjoy their stuff. The issue is basically the overall corporate politicking that goes on, the board and how it chooses to direct everything, and again, just upper management and how it handles the developers beneath them. it's important to hear from devs sometimes, and it's really good to hear from a lead dev whose mind is in the right place on this. It's killing the industry. Yeah, it's killing the art form that video games used to be, right? And I think that's an important issue, so to speak. Hold on, chat. What happened to my tab? There we go. Oh, there we go. Corporate will always want as much money with as little investment as possible. Yeah, and that's like, I think there's a need to have corporate funding in the video gaming sphere, right? Like, you guys got to think back to like 1500s Renaissance art. Unless you had a patron, it was very difficult as an artist to have a living. Same thing goes for video games and sort of the corporations that are attached to them, basically producers, production, right? Having the funding to actually make the product. You need them there to be able to help you keep the lights on so that you can make it. But at the same time, if they have too much control, if they dictate what it is that you're making, they naturally will always side on the thing that's going to make them the best return on their investment, the best earnings per share for their stockholders. This is the issue at play that we see over time, over and over and over again. And I think the important thing is to have a healthy relationship between the two parties, not have one control the other. When you have one control the other, it naturally just results in a poor product, usually. Oro, thank you for the 64 months. Hot damn. How's it going, buddy? I hope they are. I really do, Nero. Like, I really hope they are. That is my hopium, is that there is a part 3 somewhere in the works that's really good and really solid, and that maybe they've diverted some of the devs onto that. But yeah, we've been behind at this point for like over 2 years. I can't say that it's like, oh yeah, they've been diverting devs and that's why the game isn't getting as much production, right? Like, I don't think that's the case in FGO. I think the signs would be there if we were seeing certain things like that, and I haven't really seen anything to indicate that, unfortunately. You can pet the dog and cat in the event. Did you see it? I did. That is actually really cute. Trubs retweeted it earlier. Does anyone else think they've been diverting devs to FGO too? No. Maybe there needs to be a company that helps out dev studios and being independent. I mean, that's usually your producers, right? But that's sort of the issue, is that at large, a lot of indie studios, the second they get a producer alongside them, they're no longer independent. Right? So it's like, that's why a lot of indie studios have to like crowdsource and fund their self-fund their own stuff, and it usually makes the project take way too long to come out. As much as I like FGO, I would not invest in an FGO too. Yeah, I think here's what I will say. Okay, would there be people that would not play an FGO 2? Yes, they would lose some of the player base. They would also gain more players because there would be more people that would check out an FGO 2. Like that would just be inevitable. So I think at the end it would absolutely be a net positive for them to do so, but you know, the question would be, can they develop it on the side while continuing to run the current game, yada, yada, yada. Because I do think Fate as an IP is so big nowadays that it pretty much demands a game, a live service game. Okay, chat? Fate is not Star Wars or Pokemon level, but Fate is pretty damn big in the grand scheme of things. And that's where I have to say, like, yeah, it's going to kind of demand a game. So if something were to ever happen to FGO, there would need to be a replacement. MiHoYo style FGO thoughts? I don't like MiHoYo style games, so that should tell you everything. It's not that I don't like necessarily an open world style game. I think that can work, but I think you have to develop it smarter than MiHoYo did. I think, and I'm going to be honest with you guys, chat, I believe MiHoYo is just limping along with stuff like Genshin. I think people are eventually going to figure out what their formula is and how they just keep repeating it over and over and over again, and how eventually they're going to realize that MiHoYo does not want to give them an end game. They do not want to give them summer outfits. They do not want to give them anything that they actually want and expect out of their games. But it'll take its time, so. Arknights has infield now, which looks fun and interesting, but gotta wait and see how that'll turn out. I've seen some footage of it, but I haven't really looked into infield at all. And I'm gonna be honest and say that it's the Arknights IP that keeps me away more than anything else. I don't really care for basically the like direction of that IP, if that makes any sense. Open world gotcha is a huge no for me. Yeah, what did I see? I was watching somebody play the early access to Pal World earlier today, chat, and I saw someone in the comments saying something to the effect of like, "Oh, it's a ripoff of Breath of the Wild. We can't play it now." And I was like, "So y'all gonna uninstall Genshin, right?" Like, yeah, you're gonna uninstall Genshin. I guess by extension, you're gonna uninstall Star Rail for being a ripoff of FGO. Like, come on, like rip-offs happen. We all know it. We can point it out. We can criticize it even, but it's like it shouldn't make you not want to play, right? Like at the end of the day, it is what it is. Like you're gonna play a game because you like it or not because of like, oh, it's a rip-off of something that you probably liked, right? Can't uninstall if you never installed in the first place. Ah, I see. Ripoffs have been a thing forever. Exactly. Like, chat, FGO's not the first karting oriented strategy game ever. Shit. I mean, Breath of the Wild's not the first open world game ever either. So, it is what it is. Remember Doom clones? Yeah, we've been getting this crap for, all eternity at this point. Why did I expect fandom to have this shit updated? Chat. Okay, let me make sure they actually have everything here. Actual dedicated Grand Order visual novel thoughts. Damn, that might be the longest visual novel of all time. That'd be cool, right? Like I'd be okay with it, but I'm gonna say this: like at the end of the day, I don't think there's anything to stop them from, like chat. Let's say like years down the line, they decide to finally like hang it up for FGO. I don't think there's anything stopping them from just making it a like downloadable format where like basically you can just read through and play the story, right? Like I think that'd be perfectly fine, honestly. Good luck making an original idea in this day and age. Yeah, everything's derivative of everything else. Rewritten and revised story. Good luck getting them to write it all over again. Ironically, it looks like Yui's MP works really well with Yori's third skill. Yeah. Everything unlocked. All right, chat. Lightning round. Let's go. We got to get to banner review today. In fact, I think we will do them in backwards order here. We're going to start out with Ushi Gozen first. Okay. That's what I wanted to make sure of. Ooh. Chat, what's the comma Valentine C where she's in her pajamas with Parvati? Chocolate Heaven, is that the name of it? The what? The what? I knew what I was talking about, chat. People don't think I be like, but I do. Avalon, I'm gonna cheat for this one just for time's sake. A few battle pass thoughts. The game shouldn't need one, but it is entirely possible that the devs could at some point do something like that. I'd rather see them monetize something like skins instead, but it is what it is. Okay. Let's get this party started. Right, right, right. Okay. All right, guys. So first up on the sort of unit reviews here for our new Samurai Remnant collab is going to be Minamoto no Raiko, aka Ushi Gozen. Apologies in advance for the spoiler, but welcome to JP, where the devs have basically decided to not care about any sort of spoilers from the game itself. So it is what it is. Ushi Gozen ends up being our next 5-star AoE quick Avenger. I actually kind of called this. People were asking me what I thought she was going to be, and I said AoE quick. I'm not surprised to see that she is. I do think the other possibility may have been another Buster AoE, but I can see why they wouldn't go with that, all things considered. I've definitely heard some people kind of saying that they don't feel like she's that good. I don't think she's a bad unit by any means, but I do have some concerns with her kit. But just understand that that's just going to mean that she's not like the best unit in the game. It doesn't mean that she's unusable or anything like that. In fact, she's really good. And I have a point to make about her overall design and what that may mean for people. So let's start out right here at the very get-go. Again, she is a limited unit, but basically she has 12.4k attack. This is definitely a solid number, something we really like to see amongst our Avengers. Obviously, you want them to do good damage. The issue here is going to be her HP. It is very anemic for a 5-star, but again, it's an Avenger. You expect them to be very offensive slanted. She is Sky Attribute, so there is that. She has Star Absorption of 29. Again, nothing too great because she is an Avenger. And then Star Generation right here of 0.59. Her NP charge attack is only 0.55. This is neither good nor bad. It's just kind of like there. It's average. It's in the middle. Her NP charge defense, though, however, is 5%, 5 whole percent there. Sorry. Again, and you can see that that is really, really solid for her in that sense, where as she gets hit, every single hit of every single attack will charge her by 5%. So really, really a strong stat there to have in a sneaky way. Her death rate is only 5.7. This is actually pretty low, so good for her in that regard, and she is considered to be lawful evil. Her gender is going to be female. Her traits are going to be demonic, divine, Genji, humanoid, non-hominidae servant, Oni, servant, and weak to Enema Elish. And then in stage 3, she will also have the levitating trait. You can see she's another relatively rare triple quick deck unit. There's not too many of these units out there in the game, interestingly enough, and I've pointed this out before, but in this case, I actually don't think it really hurts her. I think this is actually maybe the better outcome comparatively, unless you wish to card a lot with her. And so the reason why is because it's going to make it really easy to get nice quick crits, really easy to maybe refund NP after the fact, but it does mean that if you're using double summer Scotties, that again, with her boost to the buster crit damage and not the quick crit damage there, that you're not really going to have a lot of benefit to the quick cards. So you may want to consider running an original Scotty as opposed to a summer Scotty somewhere in the comp in order to help her out. Again, though, the fact that it is a 6-hit quick card means that it is actually very good in terms of its hit counts. Everything else is above average here, only the extra attack being average. The first skill here is going to be an increase to her damage against demonic enemies for 3 turns. That is just nice and solid. That can be any sort of thing. It does not have to be a servant or not. But the second part here is going to increase her own damage against specifically servant enemies that have the earth attribute for 3 turns. Both of these are power mods. Both of these are 50%. And again, they are independent of each other, so you could get overlap and actually have both. You will also increase her own critical damage for 3 turns by 30%, all on a 6-turn cooldown, so I don't think it's a bad skill by any means. Her second skill here increases her own quick and buster performance for 3 turns by 30%, and basically the on-attack activate buff for 5 attacks over 3 turns. Basically means for the next 5 attacks here, you're going to increase your own critical damage whenever you attack with quick cards by 3 turns, activating first, by 20%. So they did put a limitation on this, but it is a relatively robust limitation, so I'm more okay with this as opposed to the, 3 attacks, 3 turns type of setup. Again, this is 20% stacking, so that does mean you could potentially get up to something like 100% extra crit damage here from this, but it would rely on you actually managing to get 5 quick cards in that time, so probably either looking at solo environment or card locking strategies, or maybe even a lucky shuffle somewhere in the interim there in order to be able to get that many. But you could also manage to have it sort of span the gap between 2 sets of cards, where maybe this somehow works out for you. Maybe like on the 3rd turn of a hand, you end up with all 3 quick cards, and then maybe on the next 2 turns, you end up getting 2 more quick cards. So it is possible to manage to get it in the normal course of things, but you'd have to get lucky in order for that to be the case. Again, all of this on a 6-turn cooldown. Let me get to her third skill here that increases her own critical star absorption for 1 turn by 2,000%. This is admittedly not enough. However, I'm going to point out the fact that this is a quick-centric unit that does have a lot of quick cards with high hit counts, so Star Generation is not going to be that bad for her in that sense. Again, though, if you're trying to soak stars to a Avenger unit, you're going to end up needing quite a bit of star absorption. This is why we see sometimes the 5,000% star absorption. I do think this number is largely okay. You will get quite a few stars to her this way. You just might not get everything. So it is what it is. From there, she's also going to increase her own crit damage by 50% for 1 turn and her NP damage by 30% for 1 turn, while also charging her own NP gauge. The only issue with all of this is all of the crit effects are in fact tied to her self-charge. So you will maybe have to consider whether or not which turn basically you end up wanting to use the charge skill on and where you maybe want to use everything else. I kind of don't like the fact that the NP damage is tied here, especially because this does sort of incentivize you to pop this skill on turn 3 so that she gets the most firepower for her 3rd turn. But I think a lot of people probably end up, just popping this on turn 1 and kind of using it and being done with it. So you have to be a little bit careful. Now, With that in mind, interestingly enough, Phantom does not have the cooldown displayed here, but I believe it is a 6-turn cooldown on this one. But still, this is a really strong skill. Please do not, assume that it isn't. But I will have a point to make about this skill as we get back to it in a minute. For her passive skills here, she has Avenger only D rank here. Again, this is pretty standard. It's not too bad. It's just NP generation rate by 14% when taking an attack, but she gets the party debuff resistance down by 4% except for herself. This is the case with all Avengers. This is nothing unique to her. She does get Oblivion Correction B, another Avenger trait here that gives her critical damage up of an additional 8%. Self-Replenishment Magic A, which is a nice one at 3.8. It should be enough to round up in most scenarios for you, so it should be really good. Madness Enhancement EX to increase her Buster performance by 12% for her singular Buster card. And Divine Manifestation, which acts as a sort of unique variant of Divinity, giving her 100 extra flat damage, but also increasing the critical damage of her quick cards by 20%, kind of trying to help you out in the face of kind of Summer Scotty being a thing. So, really a nice thing there. For her pins, I do recommend her mana loading. You're really going to want it for her in certain scenarios, so I highly recommend going after it first. Her third skill, though, is also quite useful here as it is anti-berserker attack damage aptitude. Avengers already are very offensive, which means that they're just going to deal a lot of damage when they're actually effective. So against the berserker, they would already be really strong. But again, having more damage against a berserker never hurt anyone, so this is certainly a nice one to have as it is actually effective damage for her. Her first skill here being the extra attack finesse is certainly nice, but it is going to be the odd man out this time, as you'll probably want to go mana loading, then the third skill, and then the first. Her NP is a 6-hit AoE quick NP. It deals damage to all enemies, reduces their critical attack chance by 30% for 3 turns, which is actually very significant, and 40% chance to stun them. Don't rely on the stun landing. If you do, it'll be your downfall, but if it does happen to benefit you, take advantage of it, so it's just there for your, again, advantage. Her overcharge effect here deals super effective damage to any enemies with the Earth attribute by 150%, so we can go back and basically compare this to the first skill here, where she got, again, power mod for Earth attribute on servants. So, assuming you are facing a servant, if they are Earth attribute, you get a double up now with a 50% power mod and 150% super effective modifier. That is really good. That will double dip. Those two effects will stack multiplicatively, and you will get a lot of firepower right there. Again, it's also possible that the unit is also demonic, getting you even more. So, really, really a strong thing for her to have. The issue at play that I think a lot of people are going to have with her is going to actually come down to her refund. So let's talk about that. Already talked about the 0.55 NP gain rate and how I told you that that's just pretty average. But remember, this is a quick unit. Quick units don't generate a lot of refund naturally. So, assuming 3 overkill hits, which is, again, a 3 enemy wave at 1 overkill hit each, which is the assumption that you need that you killed. As long as you kill an enemy, you will get at least 1 overkill hit. So, there is that at play, but this is 3 out of 18 overkill hits. If you're using double Summer Scotty against neutral enemies, you're looking at this basically being 31.69% there. That does include her, 3.8% there, but that 31 should be a good number, and I'm going to use it very quickly for a nice demonstration as to one of the issues that I kind of have. So the issue at play overall with Ushi's charge skill here that I mentioned before is the fact that it's actually not broken up. If it's broken up, it would actually probably be better for her. Because to give you guys an idea, Ushi Gozen has entirely enough potential refund to loop from 0. So let's start her out right here with a maxed out mana loading of 20%. From there, we can basically sit there and say, well, she'd have maybe double Summer Scotty and an Oberon. We know in a double Summer Scotty setup that basically she will regenerate 30% at minimum. We said 31.69 there. So you're looking at effectively 30% just rounding down. That means that each of those subsequent waves has 30% of their charge handled. So let's throw Oberon in on the back end, giving the 70% there, and that means your third wave is handled and solved for. In the interim, then, you've got to figure out her charge situation. So how much charge do you end up having? Well, you've got 2 Summer Scotties, and you've also got a 50% charge skill here. The issue at play is basically that we have 50% and 50% for turn 1. That's going to be 120%. That's actually wasteful. You're 20% over. But because every single remaining charge skill to you is a block amount of charge, you can't distribute this in a good way in order to save that 20%. So then we end up with one 50% charge skill left. It doesn't really matter whose, and we could use that here. As a result, you end up in this weird sort of situation now where Ushi Gozen has 20% too much charge on one turn and minus 20% charge from completing another turn. This is the issue that you run into, is the fact that she actually has 300% charge in a potential 3 turn against neutral enemies. She has no way to effectively recognize it. I've called this for a long time the Lartoria issue, because it's the same issue that my waifu runs into with the Koyanskaya system. She refunds 20% on the back end of her NPs, and she has no way to realize it because Double Koyanskaya and Oberon are all just block 50 charges, with the one exception being Oberon's 20% charge that he gets. But 20 plus 20 do not add up, so there you go. You end up in a weird sort of situation if you are trying to start her from 0. Same thing is kind of going on here with Ushi Gozen, as she is stuck in this block 50 setup and has no way to realize her mana loading. So you're probably now wondering why I told you to get to mana loading. And the reason is because it's still a good, useful tool to you in various other comps and setups, but that's not the only reason. And so now we're going to end up talking to you guys a little bit about the refund scenarios for her. So remember, that is just 2 times Summer Scotty against 3 neutrals. With 2 times Summer Scotty against 3 berserkers, you're with 1 hit of overkill on each of the 3 enemies, looking at 26%. That's not going to be enough. You're going to end up having to round that down, because again, that does include the 3.8% per turn there. If she's double Summer Scotty against 3 casters, though, this jumps all the way up to 37%. Still, sadly, that is going to probably be rounded down. Keep in mind, though, this is just 1 hit of overkill out of 18 possible hits. So you're looking at basically 3 hits of overkill out of 18 possible hits for 3 enemies there. So it's a lot of hits. It's certainly possible that you could get more hits and generate more charge, which might mean that you might have the capability of getting something like 40% and being able to round up. That may alleviate the charge situation somehow. So it really just depends on the situation that you find yourself in. Let's go talk at this point about Ushi Gozen's actual self-buff numbers. So this is basically without the use of supports and how much damage that an Ushi Gozen can do. Again, you're staring basically just her own self-buffs, no Mystic Code, no Craft Essence or anything like that. So you can see basically at the equivalent in P levels how much she would do just in normal damage, how much if she were up against the Demonic Power mod, how much if she were up against the sort of Earth super effective, I believe, there, and then how much she would do with the Earth super effective and 1 of the power mods, and the Earth super effective and 2 of the power mods. So really a nice sort of setup here in terms of her actual damage scalability. She's got quite a bit of niches at play. There's absolutely going to be a ton of stuff that she's going to be able to exploit that against. I have had some interesting conversations about her today involving, like what about some of the other units that are super effective against Earth and how do they pan out? Again, this is just something where I'm going to say if you like Ushi Gozen, you can certainly go for her. She's not a unit that you have to have. She is not the end-all be-all as far as units go. But certainly she is a good and serviceable unit for a lot of people, and I do think a lot of people are going to like her design, and that's why they'll end up going with her. At the end of the day, the damage really isn't that big of a concern, as you can see the overall scalability and just how good it can get if you manage to do this, because these are still, remember, neutral numbers in effect. For her second slide here, we have NP1 Ushi Gozen and 2 times Summer Scotty plus an Oberon with a level 100 Holy Night Supper. Yes, you read that right. That is not a Black Grail scenario. This is with a level 10 Neo Plug Suit, and you can see just how much damage difference we have here, as each of the subsequent waves can allow you to really scale up in terms of the damage capacity, particularly with that Oberon spike there in the 3rd wave. And you can see how, again, just at even NP1 here, neutral numbers, you are getting some pretty terrifying numbers here. So please don't assume that just because she can't start from 0 in a lot of these scenarios, that she's doing bad damage or something like that. Her damage is still really solid, and I think the upward scalability of the extra niches that she has is going to make her into quite a bit of a monster. She's still going to do good, decent damage for you when you don't have those niches in play, but it's not going to be world breaking or anything like that. But again, when you do manage to have the niches in play, it's going to start really ramping. And again, you can see in P2 and the amount of difference that it can make here, especially with regards to the third turn and just the overall scalability in terms of everything else as you get all the niches in play again. For our second scenario here, we have in P1 Ushi Gozen and 2x Summer Bride with basically a level 100 Black Grail. Yes, this is how you're going to be able to start from zero. And to explain this one to you a little bit better, let me find it here real quick. But basically, the way this one's going to work out is on wave 1, you're going to start out with the maxed out mana loading. You're basically then going to end up doing one of the Summer Scotty 50% charges, and then one of the Nero Brides right there, just like that. Okay. That's going to handle wave 1. On wave 2, all you're going to end up needing is basically another Summer Scotty's 50% charge. You're going to refund, actually, ironically enough, 45%. You're going to get 4% from her passive, and that should be enough to round you up. It's going to be very tight, but again, this should make it at 99% and round up for you. For turn 3 here, you're going to end up basically at this point using Ushi Gozen's 50% charge with her NP damage up. She will have refunded the 45 plus 4 again, and that should be enough yet again to get you to full and allow you to NP. So, in a weird way, NP gain is going to work better with her, and the reason for this is because of how many hit counts she has and the fact that Summer Scotty is very quick-oriented with her buff, but really doesn't do anything in the way of NP gain otherwise. So, again, this is where you can have a scenario that she actually could loop from zero. So in these sorts of scenarios, you can see the amount of damage that she can gain here and just how much of a difference it can make, as you can end up with quite a bit more firepower. The issue at play, though, is you've now ended up trading an Oberon for a bride, and that's kind of the problem that you're running into. Is essentially the fact that, yes, you've managed to gain the ability to start with a Black Grail, but you've lost the ability to start with an Oberon. So it is more damage, but it's not by a whole lot more considering. So it's just up to you to determine how you want to do this and maybe what scenario you have a better chance at. Maybe you have different supports and you'll have to do one of these over the other. Maybe you have different CEs like an MLB Black Grail, but not a good 50% quick C. Or maybe it's the reverse where you have a decent 50% quick C, but no Black Grail, and thus you're lending towards one strategy over the other. But again, that is a really interesting one. Then we have a third scenario, which is 2x Summer Scotty plus OG Scotty. This is triple Scotty. And to give you guys an example of how this one's going to work, basically, wave 1, you're going to start out with both 50% charges from Summer Scotty. That's going to be 100% charge there. You're going to end up refunding the whole 45% plus 4 again. And basically, you're at that point going to end up utilizing OG Scotty to finish that off. Same deal. You're going to end up refunding the 45 plus 4. It should be even more in that regard. And then basically, you're going to end up using Ushi Gozen's 50% for the last amount. That should end up getting you to full and allow you to basically triple loop with Black Grail, but it's the same sort of deal, and you've sacrificed basically one of your options in terms of higher firepower. So this one's actually going to come in under the Oberon at that point, and as a result, I can't really recommend using triple Scotty with her rather than just taking a 50% C, which should work out better. But again, definitely still solid in terms of damage output, and it really does depend on what you're trying to do. Now, we can compare with somebody else here, as obviously Ushi Gozen is not the only AoE quick unit out there. So we're naturally going to have the comparison with someone like, say, Edmund Dantes. Now, Dantes is another unit that he regens just flat out more than her. It's partially due to him actually having NP gain in his kit and him even having even more hit counts on his NP. Still, at the end of the day, I think you'll see that Ushi Gozen's going to have similar damage to Dantes. And if basically she manages to hit the Earth and at least one of the power mods there, which should be the case if you're hitting Earth, that she'll actually exceed Dante's in niche. So I think her damage will be very competitive with Dante's, but essentially it's going to come down to whether or not her niche is at play. If her niches are at play, she'll be better than him. If they aren't, he'll probably have a little bit of an edge on her. Again, he does have Invuln Pierce in his kit. He does have the ability to cleanse himself. So he does have some nice aspects to him still to this day that are going to help him stand out. But it is an interesting comparison to make nonetheless. Again, for someone like Dante's, basically with a 2x Summer Scotty plus Oberon plus a level 100 Black Grail and a level 10 Neo Plug suit, you're going to be looking instead at something like, let's see if we can find something comparable here. So just with the first scenario where it's 2x Summer Scotty and Oberon, basically by essentially wave 3 here with the Oberon comp, you're going to see that he's going to end up doing at NP1 about like 150 on wave 1, 175 on wave 2, and effectively 451 on wave 3. So definitely a far cry there in that regard. But remember, keep in mind, the power mods are really going to end up spiking things, and you can see as the Earth plus one of the power mods starts bringing things a little bit closer. So, again, it really just depends on what you're up against, but yes, there may be scenarios that Dante's just flat out proves himself to be better, and there may be scenarios that Ushi Gozen just flat out proves herself to be better. They're going to be somewhat interchangeable in that regard, and I don't think it's going to be too big of a concern, but it is the way it is. Now, what CEs can you end up using on Ushi Gozen? Well, Black Grails we mentioned, but the reality to this is that there's only going to be some setups that work for this, and they may not actually be ideal. They may not be your best sort of outcome. Again, comparing those two, we actually could have instead compared to the second scenario where she ends up doing a little bit more firepower comparatively with Bride. So there is obviously that option. But if you don't want to use something like Black Grail and you just want to opt into double Summer Scotty and Oberon, Traces of Christmas will at least help out in making sure you have enough NP gain, but probably not super necessary. Still, it's an all-attack scaling CE that is quick up, so it's a welfare one that a lot of you might have. But now, on JP, you can actually buy Holy Night Supper with your mana prisms, so I highly recommend it. It's still going to be a really solid CE for quick units. It's all-attack scaling. It has 50% charge, critical damage of 15%, and NP damage of 15%, even if it reminds you of the fact that Jalter did not get an animation update. Last but not least here, I'm also going to recommend something like Chocolate Heaven. It maybe will be helpful to you guys if you find yourself in a scenario where you're just shy of being able to start from zero. So it may allow you to kind of get that extra little bit of NP gen necessary to do the trick. Again, this one was a gotcha CE from an old Valentine's Day event, but it is all attack scaling. It has NP gen, NP damage up, and quick performance up. There may be other newer equivalents to the CE that you may be able to find if you don't have this one. So again, just keep your eyes peeled. You should be able to find something that'll give you a little bit more refund in order to help you stretch it if you're just trying to start from zero. That's going to be it for the, again, Ushi Gozen analysis here. So let me know what you guys think about her. Let me know how you guys feel. But one of the points I did want to make right here at the end is, I find it really interesting the way they did purposefully sort of design that charge skill. They could have split it up. They know they could have. So why did they design her that way? I'll be curious to hear you guys' thoughts. Do you think they were just trying to gimp her? Do you think there's maybe something new coming in the future? Let me know. Okay. Chat, she's the first unit that I've seen in a long time that she basically purposefully was gimped by the devs. And what I mean when I say gimped, I don't mean that she's bad. I mean, her refund very specifically does not work to allow her to be able to, like, work with Black Grail and Oberon. I don't think they're trying to limit her to make sure that she can't. I think this is a sign that things might get better for Quick into the future. Dragon's Meridian, the one true 50%. Ah, yes, of course. How dare I? All right, so that's going to be Ushi Gozen in a nutshell there. Oh boy. Oh, well, I can basically get rid of all the craft essence recommendations and damage numbers here. I'm gonna end up doing one, but what's her overcharge again? Okay. The one who desires salvation. Sorry, I got it wrong. Thankfully, fandom search actually worked for once. I'm more interested in the 4-star in the Raiko face just now. Hey, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. All right. Next up, chat. Yui Shoisetsu. Sorry, Shosetsu. I keep saying Shoi. I don't know why. All right, next up here we have Yui Shosetsu. She's going to be our newest support caster added to the game. Again, she ends up being a very interesting unit in Samurai Remnant. I'm not going to spoil anything about the unit over there. I'm just going to kind of point out that I find it really intriguing that she ended up being a summonable servant in FGO, but I'm also really happy that she is. I've seen a lot of people have sort of like interesting takes on her first form here, but I will go ahead and put it on stage 2 so as to not annoy anyone that doesn't like the first form. But again, I do think she is a somewhat intriguing unit, but I do have a bone to pick with her, and I'm going to talk about why here. It's not her fault, it's mostly the dev's fault, but we're going to kind of dive right in. So she is a limited 4-star unit. Good luck getting your hands on her if you don't roll for her here during the event. She'll probably not come back for a while, and you guys know how 4-stars can be in terms of trying to get your hands on them. You can see her attack here is relatively low at only 7.7k, but this is sort of to be expected. She's caster, she's support, so it's not like we need a ton of attack power. Thankfully, though, she does trade this for quite a bit of HP, so that is going to help her sort of stay alive down the stretch. She is man attribute. She only has a star absorption rate of 50, but that is precisely on average for casters. Star generation rate of 10.8%, and basically an NP charge attack rate here of 0.54. Her NP charge defense is only 3%, but that is the average, and her death rate ends up being 36%, which is a little bit higher than average. Her alignment is chaotic good. Her gender here is female, and her traits are hominidae, humanoid, servant, 7 knight servant, and weak to enema elish. Really not a lot of exploitable traits rolling around there. She is a triple arts deck unit, which is absolutely desirable in her case, so I am happy to see that they did that. Again, her hit counts are all average, with the exception being her quick card that is one above average here. But again, she doesn't have writing trait or anything like that, so there's no real extra boost going on here. It's just another hit count for her advantage. Her first skill here is a self guts of 1 time for 5 turns that recovers her own HP every single turn for 5 turns and grants herself debuff immunity for 1 time over 3 turns. I like this skill. This is a strong skill. Again, it just gives that nice guts up of 3000 HP and basically 1000 HP regen per turn. This is going to level as you scale up the ability, and certainly it's going to end up putting it on a lower cooldown, with the lowest being 6, which is not bad for a guts skill that has a 5-turn duration. That is a heck of a lot of uptime, so I'm actually surprised they gave it such a low cooldown. Now, that being said, I have a little bit of a bone to pick with this skill. Mostly just because Yui Shoisetsu here is supposed to be a little bit more of a support unit. And yet, the entirety of this skill is selfish. All of these effects would be amazing if she could maybe put this on someone, but instead, it's only for her. So I really wish this were a targetable skill, or at least some aspect of the skill were targetable, but it is what it is. The second effect here, sorry, the second skill here ends up being a party-wide charge of 20%. That is nice. It's not the most robust charge skill in the game by any means, but it is a really good amount here at 20% for it being party-wide. She'll also increase the party's NP damage except for herself for 30% for 3 turns, which is not the most amazing thing ever, but it's not bad either. There's no issue here with it not buffing her since she doesn't have an offensive NP. And she will gain critical stars every single turn for 3 turns up to 15. So this is a nice amount as well. It's more than your sort of standard 10 per turn. So it's just an extra little bit of potential crit, potential, NP gen that you may be allowing the party to get. She will also reduce all enemies' attack for 3 turns by 20%, and this may actually be a decent one for sort of turning the tide of a battle and making sure that the enemy doesn't just outright beat you to death. It is on a 7-turn cooldown, though, and that's kind of ironic given the fact that it's actually the first skill that should have a longer cooldown. So I wish this one had a lower cooldown, but it is what it is. Her third skill here is an increase to one ally's arts performance for 3 turns by 30%. And the second effect here is an increase to their critical damage for 3 turns by 30% as well. All on top of a charge for herself of 30%. This does mean in conjunction with her second skill that she is now a 50% charger herself, and this will allow her to get back to her NP much easier down the stretch as you're needing to maybe card with her or form triple arts chains in order to allow her to get more charge. Either way, definitely nice that she has even more. I've actually talked about this with a couple other supports, how it can actually be really nice if they have a non-offensive NP to be pretty generous on their NP gain to allow them to at least, compare more favorably to some of the more meta supports and healers and sustain units that are out there in the game. I think that's sort of the issue that we run into all the time with our 4-stars is they often end up having to rely on their skills to get back, and a lot of the times those skills end up being lackluster. The Yui Shoisetsu is designed quite nice here in that regard. Now for the actual reason I have a bone to pick with this unit. Why is she arts? I want you all to think about that for a second. That is to say, this is yet another unit that that Lasingle could have ended up making a quick support. Another viable option as a sort of low star quick support or, someone that's just not a 5-star. Obviously, I like Arts. Arts is a really strong card type, but it's actually somewhat of a disservice to her at this point to be yet another Arts support in a long line of Arts supports. At this point in the game, yeah, sure, a lot of people are going to roll for her. A lot of people are going to like her. And like I said, this is not her fault. This is Delightworks basically just making yet another character that falls into the same niche as everybody else. So that's kind of my issue with Yui, is that there's not really anything that she does that's too standoutish. There's not really a reason to have her because she's doing all the same things as several other supports. So it is what it is. I'm not going to say that that hurts my opinion of her in any way, shape, or form, but I definitely wonder what the heck the devs are doing at this point with the fact that they just keep releasing Arts Unit, Arts Unit, Arts Unit over and over and over again, and in a lot of degrees, Buster Unit, Buster Unit, Buster Unit, but we never see the quick supports actually come. And this is, I think, doubly more important given who Yui Shosetsu is as the Master of Rider. I think given the fact that Rider ends up being a quick unit in the game now, it would have made even more sense for her to also be a unit that supported quick. Heck, they may have even been able to make it so that this was an increase to one ally's arts and quick performance for 3 turns by 30%, and that still wouldn't be the most OP thing ever. So I really just don't understand this take from them, and I wish that they had maybe made her in a different way. But again, just taking that out of consideration now that I've said my piece on it, his skill is on a 6-turn cooldown. It is definitely a nice sort of just upgrade basically in that regard. Obviously the skill would be stronger if the 30% were targetable, but that may have made her a little bit too good, and it would have turned her into a 4-star 50% support, which I think the devs probably would be somewhat wary of at this point because, again, we have interesting situations going on with Waver and Reigns, especially now that Oberon is in the game. She does get Territory Creation C to increase her own arts performance by 7%, and Item Construction C to increase her own debuff success rate by 6%. Her append skill, you're really going to want the mana loading more than anything here because, again, it's just starting charge. It's going to help her get to that first NP, and you're going to kind of want to get to that NP if you're using her just to help keep the party alive. For her third skill here, she ends up having anti-caster attack damage aptitude. This is not the best, it's not the worst, but it is what it is. Again, I don't really think there's any actual need to necessarily have this one, but at the end of the day, I'm going to say this is probably the weakest of the three appends for her. Her first append right here is going to end up being the extra attack finesse improvement. This is actually going to be decent for her if you're taking her into more of a challenge environment. A lot of the times you guys end up having to use your support's cards, even if you don't desire to use so. And that's where something like this may actually work out for you, especially if you desperately need to get back to an NP with her in rapid succession. Basically, the Noble Phantasm for Yui Shoisetsu is her real unique aspect at this point, as it is dependent entirely on the buffs that people have in the party. So to understand Yui Shoisetsu's NP, again, it is an arts support NP. And how it's going to work is it's going to increase the attack of allies that have a quick performance up status for 3 turns. It's going to increase the critical damage of allies with an arts performance status for 3 turns. It's going to increase the NP damage of allies with a buster up status for 3 turns. So, to allow you guys to understand really what's going on here is basically if you have a buff of any of the 3 card types, it will allow you to gain additional buffs based off of that corresponding type. The thing with this is this will not count from anyone's passives or from their craft essences. So any buff that comes from their skills, from Yui's skills, from the Mystic codes, those are all fair game. They are a buff that is on your status bar that you have actually used. But any buff that is a more passive effect that is consistent and persistent, it is not going to be able to trigger this. So please understand that. So like, for instance, a unit that maybe would have the riding passive that gives additional riding or additional quick performance will not trigger this effect from the NP. You must actually have a quick up of some source in order to actually be able to use it. Her overcharge effect here from there ends up being the ability to recover the party's HP by 3,000. And so as a result, this is where, again, maybe having more overcharge in her kit would have been helpful to her. Maybe stacking her later in an NP chain may be more beneficial to her. Or maybe just having the ability to actually get her up to 200% charge may be to your benefit. Again, it's going to allow you to get even more healing out of her. I maybe had wished that instead the effects were actually inverted, but interestingly enough, I think they were trying to give you a very good reason to roll for Yui. And so as a result, it's the actual effects from her buffs that are the thing that scales with her NP level. So that's kind of what they're trying to sell you on. But I maybe would have liked it instead if the heal is what got stronger with the NP level and the effects were what scaled with overcharge. But it really just depends. I guess this does mean that you can whale your way into more capability with this unit. Still, I think the thing that I have to point out with regards to Yui as a 4-star support is going to be that in an interesting way, she's very similar to some of our other supports that exist out there in the game, like Medea Lily, like oh god, what's her name? The other 4-star from Prisma Cosmos, whose name just eludes me at this point, chat. God, someone's going to say it, and I'm just going to immediately snap to Miyu. Thank you. Yes. In a weird way, she ends up like a lot of those units, where she is a useful and usable unit, but she doesn't really end up having that unique reason that you must take her at any given point in time. I think she will be a very strong unit for units that have tricolor buffs, for units that maybe have a lot of buffs rolling around in the party, because she's going to be able to enhance them even further. But keep in mind, one of the issues I have is the fact that this gut skill is rather selfish, and so she can protect herself from death at least the one time, but she's not going to be able to protect anyone else in the party. So to me, Yui is going to be a piece of the puzzle, but not the solution to the whole thing. You're going to definitely need somebody else in the party that can help keep the party alive, particularly with regards to avoiding the damage of a Noble Phantasm. As long as you have that, I think Yui can actually help the party with its sustain quite a bit, so I don't think she's going to be a bad support for you guys. But at the end of the day, it's just going to come down to whether or not you desire to actually have her. For what craft essences you can probably end up using on her, I'm going to kind of go through the sort of normal staples that I really like to put on my supports. Obviously, these things can vary because you could end up putting starting charge or something like that on her. But realistically speaking, my go-to, especially when I have a unit that's a lot more carding based, a lot more over time, and sort of trying to get, keep people sustained and kept alive, I like to go with something like Prisma Cosmos. This just makes getting to the NP a lot easier on the support. You don't necessarily have to use their cards as much, and it just allows you to get the beneficial effects of their support NP as fast as possible, as many times as possible. Something like Fragment of 2030 may also be good to your benefit if you really like those triple arts chains and you feel like you can secure a lot of arts crits. This may actually help her out quite a bit. Do remember, though, she does already get stars per turn in her kit, so if you're with somebody else in the party that also has stars per turn, this may not be the best use of your craft essence on her, but it still can be a very powerful effect nonetheless. And the last one I'm going to recommend here is the One Who Desires Salvation. This one can also be really good for units where you want to get increased overcharge. It's not an infinite effect, but again, for the first 4 overcharge uses, basically it will increase them by 2 stages. So for a unit like Yui that actually heals more based off of her overcharge, this would be a good easy way in a relatively medium length challenge quest where it's going to end maybe in about 20 turns or something like that, to make sure that the majority of her NPs are actually healing a decent amount. So again, that's going to end up taking her, instead of the base 4,000, or sorry, the base 3,000 here, all the way up to 5,000. So a really decent effect in a sort of short-term to mid-term challenge fight. So again, let me know what you guys think about Yui Shoisetsu here. What's your take on her overall status as another arts unit? Do you think I'm being fair? Do you think I'm being unfair in that regard? Again, I don't hate the unit or anything like that. And which ascension is your favorite, and will you roll? I'll be curious to hear you guys' thoughts, and I will see you guys for the next one. Okay, hello everybody. Thank you, Fino, for the raid. I'm terribly sorry about that. Whenever I'm in the middle of recording, I usually don't stop in the middle to greet anyone or anything like that. But again, welcome everybody from Fino Stream. How are your rolls? Did you manage to get Ushi? High potential with rainbow buff units. Yeah, I really think that she's gonna have some interesting uses. I think she's gonna, for a lot of people, be this sort of just kind of mid unit where she'll just be okay. She's not going to be the most amazing thing you've ever seen, but then you're going to see somebody put her in the exact perfect comp for her, and she's just going to make that comp seem like it's the most broken thing ever. She kept me waiting, but I got her eventually. Nice. Got a ton of Yuis along the way. Hey, well, now you got her prepared, so you'll have a very strong one then at that point. Sadly, I really like Ushi Gozen's design. I actually also really like Yui from the game, but I don't have a lot of courts right now in JP. I rolled for NP5 of Yamato Takeru, so I've decided to hold off on this banner for now. Thank you for the bits. Chat, do you think the waifu deodorants would sell, and would it be better as a limited or non-limited product? I'm sure people would certainly love to smell some of the armpits of some of the women, but it is what it is. And heck, even some of the men. Some people like that musk. Uzveil, thank you for the follow. SSR deodorant, yeah. JP treated me nice so far in 2024. Nice, congratulations. Stage 2 and 3 are good. Yeah, I mean, I like that they ended up, especially the stage 3. I think the stage 3 is really elegant. It's a really nice take on her original design from Samurai Remnant. The first one is the one I think the first one is just weird. It is what it is. That being said, I've seen people on Twitter today ranting about this stuff, and I'm like, guys, come on, it's not that bad, right? It's weird to me, but it's not unusable weird, right? It's just it's just different. It's just standoutish from how she was. Hyper, they give her the 55. It's been a long time since this began. Yes, it has. How you doing, bud? Second looks like Shinsengumi. I mean, that's basically, it's not the exact time period she's from, but it's pretty close, right? So you also end up having this one, and like I said, this one's just really elegant. It almost combines like traditional like Japanese design almost with like, I almost feel like it's almost like Victorian era in a weird way, which is actually somewhat similar to how they did the other one. Oh, I don't know why that's so delayed, but it is. Apparently, here comes all my alerts suddenly. That's an FGO design for you. You can see it a lot of taste. Yeah, and I'm okay with that, right? Like I don't mind when like every design isn't the exact one that I want to use, right? And it's not bad, chat. It's a bodysuit with like, a nice like high leg stocking there. So it's like it'd be what it be. Obviously, this one's just very elegant and straightforward. This is basically her standard thing. I have found this really funny about Yui's design though, chat. So she has the standard Japanese like sandals, but they're heels. I find that really funny that they managed to do that for her. I don't know if that was ever a thing. I assume it was not, but I really like that. And then the last one here is interesting as well. People are horny, so second will be used most, probably. I think it looks better in sprite form. Yeah, interestingly enough, like I think the sad part about this one, as good as it looks, is just that the side part here ends up like kind of covering the a lot of the like unique aspect of this design, like her little arm. What do you call that, chat? Her like arm flap? I don't know. I have no idea what the word for that is. Thank you for the 12 bits, Ash. Take my money, I appreciate it. They took out the heels in Ascension 3 and have her tiptoeing. Listen, chat, I know, right? Like, but if you think that's bad, okay, there is definitely a worse one out there. Did I spell that right? I feel like I didn't spell that right. Anyways, the whole point is, chat, take a look at stage 3 Musashi Berserker's feet, okay? And you tell me where these feet are, okay? So, yeah, Yui might be tiptoeing. But what the heck is going on here? In the void, yes. She achieved oneness. The feet tier list is corrupted. No. I've pointed this out many a time before. This has nothing to do with like any sort of liking of feet so much as like once you notice this, you can't unnotice it. It's like it's one of those just cursed things where you're like, oh god. The only thing I can assume is that it's more like, her foot just kind of comes down and stops right here, and then like her heel is resting back here. So it's like basically this is her foot. And then there's just like this weird platform underneath. But like, damn, chat, women be talking all the time about how terrible it feels to stand in heels. Like, I cannot imagine a heel in which your toes are just constantly like this. Basically just rammed up to the front of it. That would feel awful. No feet, no pain. Yeah, you would have like no toes after that. She has hooves. Pretty much. Look at Oki-tan shoes. Yeah, those are also bad. She's basically on stilts in those. Blah 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 blah. Right? So it's like this one though. At least you could say like, oh, she's just on her tippy toes here. But like the Musashi ones, I'm pretty sure she doesn't have toes anymore. Same with Van Gogh. Van Goghs are also weird, but it's like you can see the point at which it's like here's Van Gogh's actual foot, and then like here's a stilt on the toes. Melt might have it worse. That's true. Melt definitely can't feel her toes, chat. Now I feel bad for Melt. Anyways, that was the Yui review. So last but not least, we have Miyamoto Yori. Oh man, he also had the meme number, chat. He also did it. If only his attack had a base of 6. Feet skins coming up? Please no. I thought she just had bug legs. No, yeah. Van Gogh actually, if you look closely at it, she actually has like her foot and then like a stilt that is coming down from it. Van Gogh and Zhao have weird feet. Zhao, wait, you mean Huyan Zhou or someone else? Who do you mean by Zhao? Because Huyan Zhou, I think, is isn't she the horse hoof one? Like she like legitimately actually has horse feet. Yeah. Oh, the 3-star caster, the yellow turban guy. Wait, now I'm confused. Who's Crimson meaning? She is the donkey. Are we slowly finding out that every servant has weird feet? No. I mean, chat, look at Iori right here, right? Like there's nothing weird about this. Like y'all got feet like this, right? Why isn't Iori screaming his name in English? I don't know. Does he have to? Also, chat, I gotta admit, one of the better like Final Ascension arts for a welfare. Like that is just a solid Final Ascension art. Yeah, it definitely goes hard. Okay, so let's see here. Oh yeah, right. I already remember Iori's kit without even having to look, so I can just go and put some of these down, chat. Oh, it's just nice and easy. Wow, it's not night, it's night. And then you know what? In honor of the Pheno raid, we're gonna do the meme chat. The goldenest of sumos. Okay, let me reacquaint myself here real fast. Make sure they didn't miss anything. By the way, was I correct on the Ushi Gozen charge skill? Was it a 6-turn cooldown? Or did I misspeak on that? Because I could have sworn I remembered it being 6. It was 6 turns. Sometimes even when fandom leaves it out, I pick it it helps to go over units ahead of time. Right. God, yeah, that skill does so freaking much. He's got no niche though, so the anti-saber does not help him. I mean, like lore-wise, I get it, but like the anti-saber does not help him. Okie dokie dookie. Avalon, did you send me any numbers on him? You did. Okay, that's easy. I can deal with that. Okay. All right, and last but not least, for all of our units here from the Samurai Remnant collab, we've got Miyamoto Iori. Iori is going to be our actual event welfare, so everybody gets a copy of him. I think this is a really predictable unit. I think a lot of people were expecting him to be the welfare, and I don't think this is that surprising in the slightest. That being said, Iori is a single target Buster Saber. He actually has quite the nice kit in the grand scheme of things. And I think you guys will see his damage is actually pretty respectable. So, at the end of the day, I think he's a good pickup for a lot of people, especially since some people have a hard time getting their hands on a good single target option. We do have the Evocation Festival nowadays on JP, though, so acquiring things like Hoku Saber and such shouldn't be that hard of an issue. It's just going to come down to whether or not you can actually get the leaves fast enough for you new players. And again, for older players, odds are by this point, you probably end up having another unit that is either more capable or at least as capable as Iori. Still, I do think he is a really intriguing unit, and we can certainly say that his Final Ascension art goes pretty hard. Iori starts out basically with a really nice number for attack if we just go ahead and phase out that one right there. And you guys can see, again, at knocking on the door to 10,000 attack, this is actually really good for a 4-star. Again, remember, attack is not the end-all be-all, but certainly having a higher attack is better than having low. It just means that even when his skills aren't in play, he should card to a decent amount. So it is a really nice thing to always have high attack. His HP value, though, is somewhat anemic here at only 11k, but it's not the end of the world, and he does actually have stuff in his kit to help out in terms of survivability. He is man attributed. He does have 100-star absorption, which is right on the money for average for our sabers. He's got 10.2-star generation, another sort of average development there, but only a 0.42 NP charge attack rate here. And this is actually quite interesting because a lot of our buster-oriented units nowadays usually have a lot of buster cards in their deck, and thus they compensate by having a lot of, NP charge attack rate here. This is usually due to trying to offset the relative lack of cards that they have in order to generate NP with, but you can see Yuri at least has the second arts card to help that out. He does get NP charge defense here of 3%, which is just, again, the amount that he's going to get per hit per attack against him. And he does have a death rate of 24.5%, coming in pretty much right on the average. His alignment is lawful balanced, which, again, balanced is a pretty hard one for someone to exploit against him, so that is a decent one for him to have. He is male gender, and he does have hominide, humanoid, loved one, so he's a Brynhilder's beloved trait there. Riding, like a lot of the other sabers do have. Servant, 7 Knight Servant, and weak to Inima Elish. Again, you can see with the actual deck here that it's really not a bad setup. He's got double buster, double arts, and again, all the hit counts are above average, with the only exception being the quick card, which comes in at average. But thanks to the fact that he does have riding, even the quick card should perform well. So having 2 4-hit arts cards is going to be really solid for him. And then having a 6-hit extra attack is also going to make you kind of want to do Brave Chains and Mighty Chains with him. Starting off right here at the beginning, he ends up having his first skill that increases his own critical star absorption by 500% for 3 turns. It's not the most robust star absorption. We've actually talked about this before. This is the same amount that someone like Okita has as a saber. It is enough to allow him to soak some of the stars, but certainly not all of the stars. He does at least get critical damage up here for 3 turns of 30%, and he will gain critical stars every single turn for 3 turns up to 10. His debuff mental resistance will be increased for 3 turns as well by this, all the way up to 50%, so it's going to be a little bit harder to debilitate him, especially with some of the more annoying effects like confusion and such, so really nice in that regard. All of this on a 6-turn cooldown means you can double this up in a standard double coin Skya comp, which Iori will be capable of doing. And the reason for that actually comes from the second skill here. Basically, Iori ends up having a 30% charge skill all on a 6-turn cooldown, which does mean with a 50% starting CE and his maxed out mana loading that we can 3-turn with a double coin Skya Oberon setup. It's going to be really good for him in terms of damage output. Again, the question will be, will you actually need to force a 3-turn with a single target unit? But there are scenarios where this does happen. Still, in the interim, I think you'll find that having 30% charge on a single target unit can also be pretty valuable. Combine that with something like a mana loading and a 50% CE, and you can just kind of pop off without even having to have anybody really to support you. Certainly, if you do have party charge sort of rolling around in the party at that point, you may even be able to start him from even less of a starting standpoint, maybe something like a 0% starting charge standpoint, which can be really good. So again, always having charge tends to be a better outcome for units at this point in time in FGO, and it's certainly nice that he has this. From here, though, he will also increase his own attack for 3 turns by 20% and gain crit stars up to 20, so a nice crit star bomb here. And then he will also inflict burn to all enemies for 3 turns by 1,000 damage. This is not a very strong burn, but it at least is party-wide, and this could be really good for using things like, say, Honey Lake with him, should you so choose. Again, the fact that this is on a 6-turn cooldown, though, means we get to double the skill up on turns 1 and 3 in a 3-turn, and thus we get to basically double up the attack up of 20%, not just the charge. Also, getting the Star Bomb may prove useful, especially on turn 3, so it just depends what you're trying to do, but again, Yori's already at this point got a pretty solid kit. Then we get to his 3rd skill, which does a whole heck of a lot. Basically, it is a tricolor buff, buffing all 3 card types for 3 turns by 20%. That is not the strongest in terms of percentages, but given the fact that it's everything, this is basically just a 20% across the line buff to all of his capability, including damage, NP gain, and star gen. And from here, he's also going to reduce his own damage taken for 3 turns by 500. It is just going to basically be a small damage cut, nothing too much. It shouldn't really actually do that much towards keeping him alive, unless the enemies you are facing just hit him very weakly. But again, it's just less damage you'll end up taking down the stretch. The good news here is he does actually get a hard survival type of effect, basically added on to this, as he will grant himself evasion for 2 attacks on 3 turns. Again, all of this on a 6-turn cooldown is rather insane, because it does mean that, yes, yet again, you can double this skill up. So you can pop this skill as well on turn 1, and then later again on turn 3, really just allowing him to get up to 40% out of this effect. His passive skills here, he gets just a standard sort of magic resistance here, increasing his debuff resistance, and then Riding B that we talked about earlier, increasing his quick performance by 8% on that 1 quick card that he has. For his append skills, you're absolutely going to want to go with mana loading first. This is going to be really crucial to him in order to be able to 3-turn with him, or maybe just to have more starting charge and being able to work with less skills being used on him. Either way, this is going to be the one you're really going to want to go with, just due to the options that it allows. His first skill here will be the next one, in my opinion, as the extra attack finesse is going to be really good if you're carding with Yori, given the fact that he ends up having the buffs to all of his card types. He ends up having a ton of crit stars, a ton of crit damage, just sort of rolling around in his cult. I think it's going to be really nice for him to basically want to card at times, particularly with regards to Mighty Chains. So getting even more out of your extra attack is going to be really useful to him, and as a result, this should be the second option you go with. The third option is going to be anti-saber attack damage aptitude. This to me is the odd man out, as he doesn't really have any sort of extra niche against sabers. So yes, it certainly could be nice if you just got the coins to spare, but it's not something you have to really go after too much, because it's going to do the least for him out of all of the 3 appends. But again, you will have coins to spare probably due to the fact that he is a welfare, so you should be able to get them from the shop during the event, or maybe even later on down the line if you're watching this video during the Evocation Festival. Then we get to his Noble Phantasm. It is a 6-hit single target buster NP. It's basically going to, before damage, increase his quick and buster performance by 20% more for 3 turns. So we just got done talking about how his 3rd skill there can be doubled up and gives him 20% to every single card type. This isn't every single card type, it's just every card type other than arts. So really, really solid for him to have this, and it does mean that if you manage to NP back-to-back times and just keep going with it, he's just going to keep getting stronger within that 3-turn sequence. So really, really good for him to have this, and it's not even something that's attached to his overcharge. From there, he's also going to apply Sure Hit that activates first, so he doesn't have Invuln Pierce or anything like that. Again, that's going to make maybe using something like Honey Lake actually viable on him. But otherwise, I'm going to tell you that at the end of the day, you don't really have to worry too much, as this will still be a nice effect to have. He's then going to deal damage to 1 enemy and sort of wrap things up from there, while he also gains critical stars up to 10 with his overcharge. Again, you can get even more if you have multiple ranks or you set them later in an NP sequence, but hey, it is what it is. 10 crit stars never hurt anybody, so just getting this in addition to all the other effects that he has is going to make Iori a very synergistic crit machine as well as decent NP damage type of unit. He is just going to be a solid, reliable saber for a lot of people because of the way his kit is designed. So with that in mind, I can definitely recommend certain CEs for him, be it which you guys are actually going to have coming up on NA this year, and some of the people may even vote for this in the event reruns in order to get the CE back. Cranking is sort of the gold standard of Buster CEs at the moment. It is basically all attack scaling, 50% starting charge, NP damage of 15%, and Buster up of 8%. The reason this CE is so good is compared to something like Aerial Drive, it gets 2% less Buster output at MLB, but it gets 5% more NP damage at MLB. When you're using Oberons and comps, this naturally just translates into even more damage, as more NP damage is more that Oberon can double up. So it's a really, really powerful CE at this point in the game. Aerial Drive is the other recommendation here at all attack scaling, and if you can't get your hands on Cranking, this one is permanently available now on JP, basically granting 10% Buster up, still 10% NP damage, and 50% gauge. From there, you also have Holy Knight's Supper. This one's also going to be pretty decent for the crit damage that it has added. It's also all attack scaling. It's also a permanent C that you guys can buy with your mana prisms. So again, having NP damage, critical damage, and 50% starting charge is not bad either. And if you just find yourself in a knockdown, drag-out fight where you're carding a ton with Iori, Old Reliable is also here, as you have Golden Sumo, which is also all attack scaling, has 15% attack up and 50% NP gauge. So just really nice as this applies to all aspects of his damage dealing capability, not just his NP. This is also going to impact his carding. So definitely a really nice CE that is also permanent at this point on JP. Now we get to the actual damage numbers for Iori, and we're going to end up doing a bit of a comparison here. So let's go ahead and basically hold on, let me zoom it in for you guys here real quick, just so you guys have a little bit of an easier time. Now let's go ahead and compare. So with self buffs only at various NP levels, going to go ahead and say NP1, NP2, NP3, NP4, and NP5. You're going to end up having Iori numbers at about 38K right there, 51K right here, 57K for NP3, and then 60, basically 60 and a half right here for NP2, and then, or sorry, NP4, and then 63 for NP5. So really not bad numbers. You guys can pretty much be guaranteed to get that NP5 number there since he is a welfare. This is pretty good in terms of raw firepower, and this definitely moves him quite a bit up the list in terms of actual capability compared to other units that you maybe can't get as a welfare and get all the copies for. If we're doing a little bit of actual damage numbers here, if you're utilizing a double Koyanskaya Oberon comp with Iori, instead of the raw numbers, let's go ahead and do a, let's just say wave 1, wave 2, and wave 3 amount right here for Iori. You're going to end up having basically somewhere in the order of 153K for wave 1, 165K here for wave 2, and then 590K basically for wave 3. So really, really a strong and solid amount for you guys. Wait, 0. Why is chat saying 0? Anyways. For basically the comparisons, though, we've got Saber Hokusai, which we can compare with something like a double Castoria Oberon level 100 Ocean Flyer with a Neo Plug suit. For that, you're going to be looking at instead something like 177K here, basically 249K for Wave 3, and then 472K for Wave 3 there, instead of Wave 2, as I meant to say in the prior one. Santa Karna, on the other hand, here is going to end up coming in at basically with double Summer Scotty Oberon and a level 100K scope. and it's sort of the issue with Karna is his capability to refund. He's going to end up at 175k on wave 1, 175k on wave 2, and then 401k on wave 3. So still kind of pulling his weight there by the final turn, but thank you, Oberon, for that. Roland, who's another single target saber that you guys will be getting your hands on soon on NA, basically ends up coming in at about 143k on wave 1, 167k on wave 2, and 576k on wave 3. Definitely really nice there. That's a double Queen Skya Oberon with level 100 cranking comp, so pretty comparable to Iori in that sense. And you can see that, again, this is basically an NP5 Roland that we are comparing. In fact, all of these are NP5s across the board at this point, just for comparison's sake. So Roland kind of just coming in right alongside Iori, but not quite enough to actually outplay him. And then we end up having NP5 Bedivere for the last one here. Wave 1 is going to be about 141k. Wave 2 is going to be about 162k. And then Wave 3 coming in at 471k right here. So still, you've got Iori kind of just holding his own against the other welfares and 4 stars and less. So the issue is going to be how he actually ends up stacking up against some of the higher rarities. Again, it's going to come down to whether or not they actually have the charge 2-3 turn, but you certainly can find situations where they maybe could have, say Oberon or something like that boosting them. And I think you'll find that Iori will actually do very solid against them, but you'll certainly see that there are going to be units and times that people actually do outdamage Iori. So again, he is not a bad unit by any means. He's actually a pretty usable welfare at this point in time in the game. Let me know what you guys think about him. How do you guys feel about his final Ascension art, and whether or not you guys will actually be using him? Also, for a little bit of a random extra here, are you guys actually pleased with the units being released from the Samurai Remnant collab? And who would you like to see added that didn't get in? I'll be curious to read you guys' thoughts, and I will see you guys for the next one. Later. Avalon, was that actually NP5 Roland? It was MP5? Okay, wow, I'm surprised. I'm surprised it just flat out made him stronger. Oh god, the comment section is gonna be, oh cat, it's Arya? Yes. Chat. It's the bait. Even if it's all Arya, I got them to comment, and that helps the algorithm. Cat is Eisen. Yeah, let me get my glasses so I can do the whole glasses push-up thing while, like it glints on the side. I want Tumway's husband. Yeah, dude, I would have actually really liked to see Rogue Saber. I think that'd be kind of cool. Drink your water, Cat. Thank you, I do need it. I missed it earlier. Where does Iori's attack stat fall for SRs? He's not the highest, but he's really good. Like, I don't know them all off the top of my head, Arch, but I do know that, like, Salter, for instance, among Sabers has over 10k, so. You guys ain't done not enough YouTube to get these tricks. Yeah, chat, like, y'all thought we were done? What if I did some more YouTube recording? Because that's, like, all I'm doing right now. Please, dear God, someone help me. Make it stop. Back to better review. Oh, better review's gonna kill me, chat. I'm sorry. Whoever can count Cad's eyebrow wiggles from now till the end of stream gets a prize. Hey, stop that. I'm making it hard on you. You could just farm Barbados instead tonight. I don't need Barbados. That's the problem. I remember those banners. It's okay. I still see these banners in my nightmares. Cat, we finished with Musashi, right? Like I think that was the end right there. As I went like, oh shit, I had to stop because like something messed up. Oh my screen locked. That's what it was. I remember my screen locked because I was recording too much. I didn't expect Barbados to last 2 days. I think I talked about it in the event review how long he was projected to last. And I told you guys, like, he was not gonna like die before you woke up or anything like that. We laugh to keep ourselves from crying, then cry anyways. And then the crying causes more laughter. All right, chat. Let's get this party started. Wait, so chat. So I've got to do Abby. I've got to do Demia, Penth, Kato Danzo, Shiba, and Hozuin. Did I do Cersei? Did I already do Cersei or no? Mushishi? We did Mushishi last night. How dare you disrespect our sacred tradition of bullying Barbie? What do you mean? I already killed him like 25 times. And chat, I don't need to kill Barbados anymore. I don't need to prove my ability to kill Barbados to anyone. Okay? Keep watching him. He does it unconsciously. What do you mean, Ash? Why would I do it unconsciously? No on Cersei? Okay, so I got to do Cersei too. All right, let's get going. All right, so picking up where we left off yesterday because my screen got locked up. Next up here, we have Abby Williams. Now, this is the single target version of Abby, the OG Abby, if you will. Abby is definitely a solid unit still to this day on JP. I don't think she ever won't be. In fact, I've heard some of my friends describe her as like just a really good unit to take in a boss killing comp. That is to say, whenever you get that question mark node and you have no idea what's going to be in it, Abby usually ends up being a really solid addition to one of those comps. Maybe alongside something like Merlin or something else to try and keep the party alive with sustain. But she usually ends up being kind of a little bit of a Swiss Army knife for people. Right at the bat, you can see she has about 12k attack here. Unfortunately, she only has a 0.25 NP gain rate, which is terrible. And this is basically because they ended up giving her a triple arts deck. She ends up with a 6-hit arts card. It does not feel very good to use, unfortunately, most of the time, due to how low the NP gain rate is set. So again, it is balanced for her, and I do think they intended for you to be able to do a lot of triple arts comps in order to be able to like help her get her charge enough. But over the years, she has gotten some upgrades to really help her out. So you can see they ended up upgrading her first skill. It's still the party-wide charge of 10% every turn for 3 turns. It's really nice for not only getting Abby to her NP, but also helping out the supports and other units get there. It's also going to increase the party's NP damage for 3 turns by 30%, and now will also charge Abby's own gauge by 30%. Unfortunately, it is on a 7-turn cooldown, so no dice for you guys trying to double coin sky her unless you do some sort of cooldown operation to help that out. Second skill here is just her mass hysteria. It's her terror in effect. It's going to allow her to basically have a chance to activate stun on people while also reducing their defense. As you level the skill, the stun chance goes higher. At 50%, I do think it could be a little bit stronger at this point, but hey, it is what it is, and I do think this is still a very solid skill at helping lock down enemies over time, especially since it might trigger on different enemies on different turns if you're going up against multiple. Her third skill here is a drain to the enemy, basically draining their gauge by 1 and also reducing their attack by 20%. It's just going to make them card you less hard and also help stall them out. So again, not a bad unit in that regard. Does get some really nice passes, including the EX version of existence outside the domain. And you can see that her NP is a single target buster NP that removes one enemy's buffs activating first. So basically just a really nice effect where she is going to just carve up the enemy. You're not going to stop her from damaging you unless you just have some sort of unremovable buff due to the fact that it's a challenge quest. But other than that, you can definitely see that Abby is going to be really solid in terms of dealing damage and also reducing the critical attack chance. Her damage numbers in and of themselves are not that bad, though we certainly have seen, a lot of power creep with regards to the foreigner class, and I could definitely say she is not necessarily the top at this point anymore. But certainly it is still very solid as far as how it works, and given the fact that she has the ability to buff her move against an enemy and just sort of help debilitate them and get the party going, that is one of the reasons that Abby has always been a good and usable unit, even in the face of units like Hokusai, where they were coming out shortly after her, and for periods of time we actually had people yelling, "Don't get Abby, get Hokusai." In reality, at that time, Abby actually ended up being a little bit of the better unit to have in the interim, but, certainly over time, Hokusai has managed to come into her own and been a lot more of a loopable unit, so I don't think Hokusai is bad either, but a lot of people were doing Abby a disservice by saying don't get her. She is still a very good unit to this day. Next up here, we have Demia. Demia is a very perplexing 4-star to me. Earlier we talked about Geronimo and how Geronimo has one of the most boring kits in the entire game, even though he's actually not that bad of a unit. That pretty much applies to Demia as well. Demia has one of the most uninspired kits that you will ever see. He does have a decent attack stat here. It's not quite 9k, but it's not that far off, so it's decent for a 4-star. And sort of how they've begun to treat Demia over time is he is the top dog as far as single target archers go. This is actually one of the main issues with the single target archer category, is the fact that Demia is considered to be the top damage dealer, because he shouldn't be at this point. We basically should have SSRs out damaging him, but the fact that they don't is one of the issues at play. Again, he does only have the double arts deck as a single target arts NP. I'm sure a lot of people would wish that this were instead triple arts, but I do think the devs wanted to temper him, especially with his ability to refund after an MP. Again, he only has a 0.43 NP gain rate, and that does matter for him. Again, right off the bat here, you can see with his kit, he's got defense up of 3 attacks, 5 turns, and reduced damage taken for 3 attacks. The defense up is strong. The damage taken is just a decent amount. But at the end of the day, it's just a solid defensive skill for him. His second skill was a quick arts and buster tricolor buff of 30% up for 1 turn. Thankfully, they decided to upgrade this, basically make it 3 attacks, 3 turns, so that it didn't all have to be used at once. And it's also now a 30% charge, all on a 5-turn cooldown. In that regard, this cooldown being only at 5 is kind of nuts. It means he gets a lot of uptime on this skill. But certainly I understand them transitioning this out of a 1-turn buff into a multi-turn duration buff, so that you just get more capability to card with him. His third skill here is basically just an attack up of 3 attacks, 5 turns of 40%. This is a shitty limitation on him, and it basically means you're going to want to pop this actually when you plan to NP, not earlier, because you'll probably end up using it on carding otherwise. So it is what it is, but this is kind of the issue with Demia's kit. It is just very straightforward. He's got defense, he's got attack up, and he's got, card buff. That's it. Once you get to his NP, you can see why they wanted to keep him in check a little bit. He is a 10-hit single-target arts NP. He deals damage that ignores defense buffs to one enemy. It has had its interlude, though, so they did increase the amount of damage it does, and they basically changed him from having a chance to reduce the NP gauge of 60% to now just 80%. This actually brings him in a little bit ahead of Squirtoria, who only has a 70% chance to drain. Unfortunately for Demia, he is not nearly as loopable as she is, and he definitely requires his cards to be able to loop all the time. So that's kind of one of the issues that he ends up having. Realistically, that is why they kept his NP gain rate low, is because the hit counts on his NP are so high. So it is what it is. I do think Demia is still a really solid unit at this point in time, but being the most solid single target archer in terms of damage output is not that good of a medal to win at this point in time in the game, because honestly most people actually that compete with the archers out damage them. So again, it is what it is. I do think Demia is an interesting unit. He is story locked, he's difficult to get your hands on, he doesn't get a lot of good solo rate up banners, so it's up to you if you want to decide to try and roll. Next up here, we have Penth. We actually haven't had the chance to talk about her yet. Penth, honestly, the biggest issue with Penth is that she's going to struggle with survival. She only has 10k attack, and she really doesn't have any sort of hard survival in her kit to stay alive. She is the epitome of a glass cannon, though. She has over 10k attack as a 4-star, and she ends up basically having a triple buster deck here to really help her pop off. Her first skill is just a straightforward increase to the party-wide charisma of 18% there for 3 turns. Her second skill is a debuff immunity for 3 turns, which is basically her survival skill. Again, it's going to stop her from getting debilitated, but it is not going to keep her alive in the face of her getting punched. So, from there, though, it's also going to charge her own gauge every turn for 3 turns by 20%. This does have some unique applications, as it can basically allow her to be able to, charge up over time and handle a single enemy wave for someone. So, I do find it to be somewhat useful in that capacity, particularly in a scenario in which she may be able to card in a prior wave in order to help the party get stuff down. Her third skill here is an increase to the party's buster performance of 3 turns by 20%, which also sort of helps her out in that scenario where she might want to take out a single enemy wave, but help out the party. She's got attack up, she's got buster up for the party, really nice there. But then, in addition, she also increases her own damage against any Greek mythology male. So this is a male from the Greek mythology sort of pantheon there. For 3 turns, and it is a 100% power mod. Against Greek mythology males, Penth is basically unmatched. She will absolutely slaughter them. This is a really insanely powerful power mod. You definitely want to be careful if you were ever taking a Greek male up against her. But again, this could be really good for you as the player. If you can manage to get her to her NP, she's absolutely going to decimate people. You just have to be careful with break bars and stuff in play now. But the skill is on a 5-turn cooldown, so relatively fast to get back due to its uptime. With regards to everything else here, her Noble Phantasm is a single target 8-hit NP. It deals damage to one enemy and then reduces their attack for 3 turns by 10%. So I do find Penth to be never the most meta unit by any means, but she's always been a fun unit to use. She's the epitome of a unit you do not have to have, but she has some really nice niche uses at certain times, and I really do enjoy getting to haul her out and just have her just absolutely beat the crap out of someone. From there, we've already talked about Yagyu, so next up is going to be Kato Danzo, another one of our story-locked units. I'm of the opinion that Kato Danzo is honestly not in the best shape at this point in time. I think she is an interesting unit that honestly, for one, deserves a little bit more story time, and 2, she actually needs to be somewhat buffed in terms of her kit. She's not the worst unit by any means, but I do feel like with the way the current meta has evolved over time in FGO that she could really end up using some love. Why do I say that? Well, she does have a double buster, double quick deck, and that is actually going to be to her benefit since her first skill increases them both for 3 turns by 30%. It's all on a 5-turn cooldown, so it's relatively low. Her second skill is a targetable 1-turn evasion, so she can put this on herself or someone else. That's also going to increase their critical star gen rate by 45. Her third skill here is an increase to one ally's invincibility for 1 turn, and then basically an increase to their star generation rate for 1 turn by 45 as well. She has 2 targetable hard survival skills, but she doesn't end up having basically any sort of capacity to help her get to her NP. That's always kind of been her biggest issue because Kato Danzo for a long time honestly hasn't had the highest damaging NP anyways. So realistically, the only reason a lot of people used her is sort of as this niche survival unit to maybe come in and help the party. That being said, she has had her NP interlude at this point in time. It is a 3-hit AoE NP that deals damage to all enemies, increases the party's buster performance by 20% for 3 turns now. Unfortunately, it's after the NP, not before, so there's that, but it still is meant to help other people out. Thankfully, she does have the overcharge effect that will deal super effective damage to demonic enemies, so she does have that as her niche use. But yes, at this point in time in the game, I do feel like Kato Danzo could use something like a 30% charge skill, and that would really help out her overall usability. So again, I don't really recommend rolling for her devotedly unless you just really like the character or you're trying to collect another story-locked unit. But otherwise, I do think she could be good if the devs manage to actually give her some love. Next up here, we end up with Cersei. Cersei is a very solid single target option for a lot of people. In fact, she ends up being a lot of people's go-to option if they've kind of graduated on from Medea. That is to say, they maybe haven't landed one of the sort of rare SSR single target casters, but they've managed to get spooked by Cersei due to her permanent nature. Again, she's single target buster with regards to her being a caster there. Her attack stat is not all too great, but it's not terrible either. And she does have a triple arts deck, even though she has the buster NP. Her first skill here does not need to be leveled to 10, thank God, but it is a over 100% charge skill. Her second skill inflicts poison for 3 turns to all enemies, and then further reduces their defense by 20% for 3 turns. And then her third skill here is a cleanse for the entire party with critical star generation buff for 3 turns of up to 50%. This is actually one of the really nice uses of Cersei as well from time to time, is that she can come in, nuke something for you while also cleansing the entire party of negative status effects. Can be useful to you in something like a raid, like the Barbados raid that you guys saw, and also potentially in other scenarios where you just maybe have a debuff getting rolled out right at the beginning of battle. So again, Cersei has a really nice kit. You can see her Noble Phantasm has had its interlude. It is a single target buster NP of 5 hits. It deals damage to one enemy and then has a sort of unique stun effect that it will place on enemies where it turns them into a pig. Pigify is actually really interesting because it applies almost specifically when you never expect it to. That is to say, it will work on units that it absolutely should, it will work on units that it absolutely shouldn't, and it won't work on units that it should. Just is what it is. It's a very confusing skill. It's difficult to determine who has immunity to it and who doesn't, and it often ends up being a case of, if you're going to use Cersei, maybe go check ahead of time. Still, it is what it is. And she can also, from there, remove their offensive buffs after the damage goes out. Her overcharge effect is just a simple, sort of straightforward 10% reduction to their critical attack chance for 3 turns. So I do think that Cersei's damage, in some degrees it could be better, but this is just sort of the issue that we run into with single target casters. Again, at the end of the day, I highly recommend checking her out if you don't have any other option, and she can be a very good single target caster for you. Last but not least amongst the 4 stars here is Queen of Sheba. She is also a single target caster, and she is story locked. She also doesn't get a lot of banners. In fact, I believe someone was commenting earlier that this is actually one of her first banners in a long time. So, caster of Midrash, as she is otherwise known, basically ends up having another decent attack stat. She's got double buster, double arts deck, and that is also to her benefit, as you will see here shortly. Her first skill has had its upgrade. It used to just increase the party's attack basically by 17.8%. Now it's up to 20% for 3 turns, and it's also a self-charge of 30%. Something that basically Midrash desperately needed, as Midrash was one of the only single target casters in the entire game that didn't have charge in her kit. I believe now at this point in time, the only one that still doesn't is the Welfare Shootin' caster, but still, it is a rough road to hoe if you were one of those units. So thankfully, they ended up coming back in and giving that to her. And you can see here from the second skill that she now also has 100% crit damage for 1 turn, as well as ignore invincibility. So really not too bad of a kit. The only issue is that she is arts, and so getting the stars on her is somewhat concerning. That being said, she increases the party's arts and buster performance for 3 turns by 20% each, so a little bit of extra utility for her, and then a 10 crit star bomb. This is nice, but this definitely could stand to be even more, and she doesn't also have any sort of capability in her kit to soak things. Given the fact that she is a caster, that is a concern, because obviously you're going to want to have the unit that has 100% crit damage probably soak the stars. Still, you can see her NP is a single target arts NP. It basically deals damage to one enemy, and then as an overcharge, reduces their defense, attack, and healing received for 3 turns each by 10, 10, and then 30% for the last effect there, the heal rate. So, I do think Midrash is a lot more usable now that she has the charge skill upgrade, but I do think she could certainly use a little bit more love. We'll see how that pans out in the future, but I still think a lot of people are going to roll for her just because they really like her design, or they essentially find that she is another story-locked unit to collect. Last one on this entire banner for this entire segment is Hosuin Inshin. We actually went over Ken Leong Yu earlier, and Hosuin is sort of the closest analog to her. However, I feel like, interestingly enough, as a 3-star, he kind of does it better. That is to say, he knows what his niche is, and he fulfills it. Again, his attack stat is nothing to be desired, really, at only 6.7k, but he does have a NP charge rate of 1.06. His quick cards, he managed to have a triple quick deck. He manages to have 3 hits on that, so you're really going to want to go with the quick cards when possible on him, but you may need to use the arts card for more NP gain or the buster card to get him more damage from time to time. His first skill here is an ignore evasion, basically for 3 turns. Definitely nice to have at least multiple turn duration on that, and a critical star regeneration buff of 3 turns of 30%. The second skill here increases his own quick performance for 1 turn of 50%. This is really nice, but you're going to want the stars to align. You're going to want all the quick cards to show up here so you can get that triple quick chain, or at least double quick cards to help that out. Again, this is sort of the issue with it. While it is strong, it is only the 1 turn duration. It's also going to increase his own mental debuff resistance, sort of preventing things like charm and terror from applying. His third skill here ends up sealing the enemy's NP for 1 turn and reducing their defense for 3 turns by 20%. So you can see it's just a nice kit for kind of allowing him to pop off and enable his damage. His Noble Phantasm is a arts support NP. It increases his own attack for 3 turns, basically up to 50%, assuming you have NP 5, as you should. He will increase his own critical damage by 100% for 3 turns as well, so really strong there, and grant himself instant kill immunity for 1 turn on top of that. Here he will also grant himself evasion for 1 time, so this does give him a little bit of a hard survival skill on command for being able to outlive an NP, but it's certainly not the most robust effect. Still, again, he doesn't have a whole lot in terms of sustain, but he definitely has it in terms of offense, and that's where I say he just kind of knows what he is and does it well. His overcharge, as the last aspect here, increases his own critical star regeneration rate by 100% for 3 turns, so certainly getting to his NP and using that to set up his second skill and all of his quick cards, really beneficial to Hosuin. And again, you guys can see the actual timing of the banners here. You're going to end up basically with some interesting pairings, as you're going to have Moriarty with Demia, you're going to have Shez with Penth, and you're going to end up having Musashi with basically the entire Shimosa Epic of Remnant cast, and then basically Abby with the entire Salem Epic of Remnant cast. So realistically, very straightforward banner. It just took me a long time to get through it. So again, I do think the Singularity Repair Support campaign can be decent banners for you guys, depending on what your goals are in FGO, how new you are to the game, you name it. But it's not something you should just immediately write off, and it can provide you with a decent way to get certain rarer units on a single raid up. From there, we just had the Advanced Quest Part 10, so that is pretty much going to wrap up all of November. Now, in November here, we end up with the pre-release campaign for the Fairy Night Cup. The big thing to understand about the Fairy Night Cup is, again, it is you're basically going to be your Christmas Lotto, but it is a fest event in terms of its structure instead of a Christmas event in terms of its structure. What does that mean? That means you get a 90 plus and plus plus node right off the very bat, day 1. So you don't have to worry too much about there being a good node for you to farm. It's not like the Christmas events of old where you had to go through all the low level nodes in subsequent days until you worked your way up. So really, really nice for this one to be the case. Again, the pre-campaign here just gave out some apples and basically some foes as well if you managed to do any things, but there was no actual banner here. Oh, sorry, there was a banner here. This was Morgan Le Fay's banner. Yeah, that's right. This is basically her 4th banner within 2 years. It was at this point that a lot of people began to criticize how many banners she had gotten. But the reality was she actually had not gotten them in nearly as fast of a rate as Taigong Wang had. Still, you can see you did get some other campaigns here to add all daily quest rotations available and basically servant strengthening quests and all interlude campaigns being half cost. So really, really nice in that regard. The banner here, we've already talked about Morgan, so I'm not going to spend any time on this, but it does have Valentine Witches as the sole rate up CE. And this is a very good CE if you manage to actually need it. It is all attack scaling, increases basically your ability to ignore invincibility, and then also gives NP damage and NP gain rate by a significant amount. So this is a really good CE over time. For a lot of people, it's not going to end up outplaying something like Honey Lake, but maybe you don't have access to Honey Lake anymore. This is going to be a good substitute, or maybe you just need something that's meant to, help you get to that NP a little bit faster down the stretch. So really, really nice in that regard. Again, Valentine's Witch is a very solid option for a CE. That's going to be it for the pre-campaign, and then we go into the actual Fairy Night Cup. Oh boy, am I going to have a lot to say about this one. So there is no welfare in this or anything like that. We just have three different summoning campaigns, basically, and each one is an interesting unit. Okay. Sorry, chat. I stopped the recording right there. Adds eyebrow wiggles. Yeah. But what if I just keep doing this like this many times? Then are you going to be able to actually count them? Yeah, my entire goal here is to mess you up. Also, do understand that some of it is not like an eyebrow wiggle, and some of it is actually like me just like, doing an expression like this, as opposed to like me being like, and I definitely do this some. I'm aware that I do this, right? Like, but no, there are some where like I'm actually just trying to like make a point, and you will see me raise my eyebrow. Didn't agree to count them, so I don't have to. That's a good point, Peanut. Fight the power. Considering rolling this many, depending on how. Yeah, okay, so chat, we went over Balbon and Barghest. Burrito Mart is definitely one I've got to talk about because she's new here. We went over Charlie already. We went over Budimonte already, didn't we? And I'm pretty sure we went over Roland because he's there. And, ooh. Have I done... I know we've done Sigurd. Like, we should have done this. But I don't think we've done these three. You're rating and counting? Oh, damn, you're going to get tunnel vision. Bryn was LB2. Did I already talk about her? So it's just Kentucky and Hercules? Yeah, it's sad that like I have to sit here and actually like talk to you guys about this because I'm having a hard time remembering myself. I'm just surprised I haven't done Kentucky, but or Herc for that matter. Just do banner 1. Oh, don't worry, we're fine. It's just Burrito Mart for this one. Like it's literally that. No, I could talk about the C's, but it is what it is. All right, so first up here, we actually end up having Burrito Mart. Burrito Mart, a lot of people are going to compare her to Bradamante, as she is very similar. They are both AoE quick Lancers. I do find that Burrito Mart, to me, is a interesting unit. I think she's a very solid unit, and I think it's actually due to Burrito Mart that you end up seeing some love kind of given the way of Bradamante. That being said, I think a lot of people, obviously people liked her design when she came out, but I think a lot of people also sort of panned her, and that's just due to the close proximity of the release of Melisande being fresh in everyone's mind, with her releasing in the prior year. A lot of people are still caught up on that as far as AoE Lancers go, and a lot of people will compare every single AoE Lancer that comes out to Melisande. So as a result, Britomart doesn't really necessarily get a fair shake, but she is certainly a solid option for you should you desire her. And again, you can see her NP is actually, sorry, the stages of her ascensions are actually very interesting, as she kind of starts out in a full-blown suit and then ends up sort of transforming into more of this like fairy princess type of aesthetic. She does have a double buster, double quick deck, which is definitely really good in comparing with double Scotty there, particularly Summer Scotty. And you can see that she will grant herself invincibility for 2 attacks, 3 turns. She increases her own NP gen rate for 3 turns by 30%, which is really nice for a lot of our quick units, and increases her own critical attack chance resistance for 3 turns for a little bit of extra survivability there. She will gain 10 crit stars here on the use of the second skill, also gain crit stars every single turn for 3 turns up to 10, and then grant herself debuff immunity and increase her critical damage by 30%. So really pretty solid there in terms of the way that second skill works as well. The third skill here, though, is going to be the breadwinner in terms of damage and charge, as it's going to give her quick and buster up for 3 turns of 30% each, and then also charging her NP gauge by an additional 30% effect there. So really solid for her to have this, and again, it's what's going to enable her to actually be able to loop. From here, you can see that her NP is actually a 6-hit AoE NP. It has Invuln Pierce that activates first, and then increases her own damage against anybody that has Riding. Interestingly enough, if this were a archer against sabers, this would be really useful, but as a lancer against archers, this is decidedly less useful. That being said, there are still plenty of units out there that may be neutral, or maybe even something like a berserker that would be effective. So certainly this is still a decent niche to have, and you can see as basically it's going to increase her damage by 50% for 1 turn, making it a power mod that will impact also the cards after her NP. She's then going to deal damage to all enemies, and then her overcharge effect will deal extra damage to enemies that are a rider. That is to say, anything that is a rider, she will gain super effective damage against. Really, really nice, considering a lot of rider enemies should have the riding power mod. So, in a weird way, you have Bradamante being effective against, obviously, archers, but potentially riders as well. It's an interesting take on a unit to make them effective pretty much against 2 different classes, and I do think that's going to allow for some niche uses for Britomart. She's the epitome of a not gotta have type of unit, but if you really like her, you can absolutely go for her, and I think you'll see a lot of people do like her design, regardless of the way that her kit actually manages to work. She is a loopable unit. I believe she even can Black Grail loop if memory serves me correctly, so she's not a bad unit by any stretch of the imagination. But again, everybody is going to end up getting compared in that class to Melisande until they start getting some actual NP interludes and buffs to help them out. We've already talked about Barghest and Balbon Sis, so we don't need to mention them at this point in time, but we can talk about Apex, which is a very solid gacha CE right here. The 5-star CE is all attack scaling, and it basically gives 50% charge, 10% buster up, and an overcharge by 2 stages for 1 time. So again, a really solid option if you need that combination of effects, particularly the starting charge, as it could allow a unit to really pop off at least the 1 time. It just depends on whether or not you're going to need something hard like this, but this is a really solid CE should the conditions be right. Road to Star is also not bad, simply because it is one of those rare 4-star star bomb types of CEs. So not the most in terms of stars even at MLB, but hey, it is what it is. If you just need stars on a budget, it is an option. And honestly, Muscle Bullet there is actually not a bad one either for a 3-star. Your summoning campaign number 2 is Charlemagne and Bradamante and Roland. I have already covered all of the units on this banner, so there is no need to go over them, and it is the same CEs again. So next up here, we have Summoning Banner 3. Oh, actually, just real quick as an aside, this banner in particular actually resulted in one of the worst nodes that FGO has ever seen. That is to say, the banner that you see at play is the node that people had to go up against, a double saber and lancer node, again with a unit like Charlemagne that has star attribute, making a lot of people really annoyed when they tried to use their archers up against this, since Bradamante was there as a counter unit. It is what it is. It was a dick move by the devs, but that is the story about how this banner came to be. It was because of that node. Lastly, we have the summoning campaign number 3. We have actually already covered Brynhildr, Sigurd, Siegfried, and Kriemhild already to this point. So all that remains is Kentoki and Heracles, so we're going to end up covering each of them. Again, Kentoki is still a really solid unit at this point in time in the game. When he first came out, he was really good, but then break bar started to be a thing, and it really began to cramp his style. Still, he's ended up now getting some nice upgrades over time that have allowed him to just still be a really solid option, and Charge has come back into play alongside the Buster meta, really helping him out. So, he's got a gorilla deck here with triple Buster outcomes, and really pretty nice in that regard for his carding power. He gets 1 turn of attack up by 50% on a low cooldown. Definitely a strong skill, but I'm sure a lot of people would prefer if this were multi-turn duration. His second skill is a 50% charge skill on a low cooldown. Again, it is 6 turns, so you could potentially double this skill up, allowing him to be utilized in a double coin Skya setup should you so choose. And considering his first skill is a 5-turn cooldown, you could pop that skill on a turn 2 and a turn 3 type of setup. So you do have some leeway with how you choose to use him. And again, his third skill here is sort of his survival skill. It's just a self-heal of up to 3,000 with the ability to increase his own offensive debuff resistance, making it harder to put a stop to him. Again, though, his biggest issue is he has no hard survival anywhere in his kit, so he is rather squishy. You should just make sure you don't give enemies the chance to actually hit him too much, and you should be fine. His NP is a single hit, single target Buster NP. It deals damage that ignores defense buffs to one enemy. It has had its interlude. They increased the amount of damage and then also added the ability to reduce the Buster resist by 30% for 2 turns after the damage goes out. From here, he also has a 50% chance to stun the enemy for 1 turn, which can have its interesting uses if you manage to pull this off in a boss fight. And certainly, I think you'll see that Kentoki is a unit now with his NP interlude that just hits amazingly hard. He is absolutely an easy bar break for most scenarios, and he can be somebody that might be able to handle multiple as long as you actually manage to support him well. So I do think Kentoki has basically gotten the upgrades that he's needed to stay viable, and he is still a really solid option for you. Last but not least, we have Mr. Heracles here, aka Hercules. Herc is a unit that is talked about a lot in FGO. He is that unit that basically a lot of people will tell you should start the game with. I am of a different opinion. I actually don't believe you should start the game with Herc. And the reason for this is because it's actually somewhat difficult to get a Herc online to his full capacity. Usually the reason a lot of people will suggest him is because they know what he can turn into down the stretch. He is quite the monster in terms of challenge content and survivability. He's what we refer to as a cockroach. That is to say, he is very difficult to kill. And given his triple Buster deck, the fact that he is a berserker makes him very good at just pumping out damage in return. So Herc is a solid option, but why should you maybe not start the game with him? The reason for this has mostly just due to the fact that he is a unit that you really need Bond 10 with him in order to allow him to reach his maximum potential. That is to say, his Bond CE is a major part of what makes him so strong in those scenarios that I just described. You can absolutely use him without it, but it's not going to be the best of situations for you, as basically his survivability without it can be somewhat a problem. So just kind of going through the kit right here, you can see he has over 10k attack, really solid in that regard. The triple Buster deck for him to be able to hit really hard. And again, his first skill here is going to be an increase to his own attack for 3 turns by up to 31%. He increases his own mental debuff resistance for 3 turns as well by up to 42%, so rather odd numbers on that skill, but unlikely for it to get a buff at any point. The second skill here is just a 1-turn hard evasion. This is very nice, but the problem, as you can see, is that berserkers are squishy. So outside of the 1-turn duration of this skill, how are you going to stop people from dealing damage to her? We'll talk about that in a second here, but this is also going to increase his crit damage for 3 turns up to 36%. His third skill started out as just battle continuation, a guts for one time over 5 turns with a decent amount of HP on it. Unfortunately, it had a 7-turn cooldown, so it was somewhat difficult to actually be able to like kind of get a whole lot of usefulness out of this. This absolutely would prevent him from dying, but once your guts was gone, you had a hard time. You really needed to, in a lot of circumstances, use the evasion early and then try to basically get the guts pop and then get back to the evasion to keep him alive. And if Herc was just getting wailed on or you just got bad RNG, there was not a lot you could do to stop that. From here, though, the devs realized that he could use some love, and they gave him an upgrade called Indomitable. This basically just changes it so that his guts can now stack with other sources of guts, which is really nice because that was one of the issues that it had, is that it did not stack with his craft essence for bonding. So again, you can see now, though, when his guts will proc, basically whenever it is popped, it will also grant him a buff for 5 turns that increases his own buster performance by 20% whenever a guts is activated. This is really nice with the addition of his bond CE because he will get multiple guts from that, and each one of them can trigger this 20% buster up, allowing him to become quite the nightmare should he get closer and closer to death. So again, really a solid upgrade for him. You can see he does have Madness Enhancement B as well for some additional buster up there. And his Noble Phantasm is a 15-hit single-target buster in P that deals damage to one enemy. It will also further reduce their defense for 3 turns by 10%. Nothing too amazing as far as an effect goes, but hey, it's just icing on the cake at that point if you get him to his NP and you manage to keep triple bustering after the fact. Again, just as a quick sort of sneak peek here, you can see his Bond CE here, his Castle of Snow. Whenever it's equipped on him, it grants him Gut status for 3 times, reviving at 5,000 or 500 HP. Whenever a Guts gets triggered, if the unit is the only unit on the field, it means that the enemies will just stop attacking and end their turn. This could actually be really useful for Herc, and it's why a lot of people use him to solo. Herc is an amazingly powerful unit if you use him and set him up right, but he definitely requires investment and definitely requires some time in order to get him working. So you can see the overall banner pairings here with Bryn with Kriemhild, Sigurd with Sumanai, and Kentoki with Herc. Definitely really solid. Unfortunately, they did end up pairing basically these single target berserkers with each other, but certainly both are really usable and useful. Again, the same sort of CEs here, so nothing too much we have to talk about with regards to this. Just a bit of a sneak peek at what the lottery will give you guys in this one. You can see some really nice sort of materials to look forward to. So up to you guys to determine how you want to handle the lotto for this one, but it is certainly going to be your first lotto in basically 8 months since Tesla Fest at that point. So a lot of you will probably want to go quite hard in it. So that is the Fairy Knight Cup. Then we have the Lost Belt 7 pre-release support campaign. Again, this is just pretty much trying to get everyone prepped. You can see they do end up having a summoning campaign for Artoria Caster and Da Vinci Rider. Have I covered these two? I feel like I covered Castoria back during the download campaign, but did we cover Da Vinci? I think we did cover Da Vinci. Was she at Anniversary? There we go. Learning with Manga pre-release campaign. Okay, so yeah, we did already cover. All right. So I actually have already covered both of these units, so there's no need to cover them again. Again, Castoria, I believe, was at the 25 million downloads campaign, and Leonardo da Vinci was during the Learning with Manga pre-campaign for that. From here, you guys can see, though, there are some decent CEs, including Walk in the Park and Celebrate Memories. Both of these CEs are a starting charge of 60%. it is split stats here on Walk in the Park. It gives NP damage up of 15% and critical star absorption of 200%. It's not a bad seed, just probably not worth you leveling it up. Celebrate Memories is also 60%, also split stats. This one is Quicken Buster up of 10% each. Really wish this one were all attack. It would be an absolutely phenomenal C if it was. But as a result, still, again, you probably don't want to waste the time actually leveling it. And that's pretty much all there is to talk about with regards to this one and this campaign. You do get some returnee rewards for those of you guys that have quit playing at any point in time. But it's pretty, again, straightforward as far as banners go. Then we round out November with Advanced Quest Part 11, and now we have finally made it to the final month of the year, December. Whew. So here we have the Road to Lost Belt 6 campaign, or sorry, Road to Lost Belt 7, number 6 campaign is basically Lost Belt 6. Again, you can see you got some interludes that unlocked. So just like we talked about before, even if you don't have the unit, you should be able to do some of the interludes for these. You got recollection quests in here, one of which is definitely a difficult one, but it is what it is. Then we get the return of some very desired units. So first up here is going to be Mr. Muramasa. Now, Muramasa is another unit that I think is still to this day just incredibly strong with his kit. He does a whole ton of sort of effects and capabilities. He is a very difficult unit to stop, and that makes him good in challenge scenarios, but he's also a really good farmer because he can be a Black Grail arts looper. So again, he does come in here with only 11k attack, but that's nothing too much to worry about. In fact, I will point out that the one weakness, if you could say that he has any, that Muramasa has, is actually his damage output. That is to say, when compared to other Black Grail loopers, they may outdamage Muramasa. That does not mean that Muramasa is a bad unit, though, by any stretch of the imagination. He still ends up having really robust HP, though, to trade off. He's got double arts, double buster in terms of his deck, and you will see just how strong this kit is. Basically, he increases his quick arts and buster performance for 1 turn each by 50%. He will also increase his critical star absorption for 1 turn by 100%. Absolutely fantastic for a Saber to have this amount. And he will gain critical stars up to 15 here on a 5-turn cooldown. His second skill here will grant him Invuln Pierce, making it so that you are not going to stop him. It's also going to increase his own critical damage against enemies that have evasion or invuln for 1 turn, further punishing any enemy that would try to stop him, basically giving him 100% crit damage up in that scenario. He will also increase his critical star generation rate for 3 turns by 100%, and as if that were not enough crit damage, even though it was conditional, we're just going to give him 100% crit damage up for 3 turns. So the man can have 100% at minimum and up to 200% in a crazy scenario that the enemy decided to try and dare stay alive. His third skill here will basically charge his own NP gauge by 50% and also grants himself the Blaze buff for 3 turns that will charge his NP gauge whenever he normal attacks. This is pretty similar to the effect that you get on Koyanskaya's middle skill, except instead of it being specific to Buster, this is just all of Muramasa's attacks. So really nice. The only thing it's not going to impact is his actual NP. Still, 10% charge there is very, very solid and makes it easily able for him to card back to an NP should he so choose. His passive effects here are just fantastic, particularly the unique one that he has that is a power mod against sovereign enemies by 20%. He just straight up gets 20% more damage all the time to anybody that has a king trait. His Noble Phantasm is AoE arts at only 3 hits. So again, a little bit of an NP gen issue there, but due to the 50% charge in his kit, I don't think you'll find it to be that much of a problem. His NP first increases NP damage by 10% for 3 turns. So again, this will stack and get stronger as he continues to loop, and that does mean that Oberon can also enhance it. He will remove enemies' offensive buffs just in case you dare wanted to try and kill him first rather than outlast him. He will then deal damage that ignores defense buffs to them. So yeah, you also can't just try to mitigate him. Even if you tried to pop an actual survival skill, Muramasa does not care. He has no feelings towards you. His overcharge effect also increases his arts performance for 3 turns by 10%, activating first. So again, another aspect of his MP where he just gets stronger within a 3-turn loop. Again, you can see Muramasa just absolutely has a disgustingly good kit. It is one of the just most absolutely overstuffed power creep kits in the entire game. Muramasa is the epitome of a laundry list in terms of his skills, and somebody that the devs are going to have a hard time actually trying to make units better without just making them flat out outdamage him because of how much he can do. So, again, no matter how much Muramasa is ever outdamaged, rest assured, Muramasa is still a good unit to roll because of how useful he can be. Next up here, we end up having Melisson. Chat, have I actually discussed Melisson already? I know I haven't discussed Oberon. Oberon hasn't had a banner. But did Melisson have a banner at any point prior to this in the year? Or is this her first banner in over a year? I don't remember you covering her. Okay. Oh boy. Oh boy. Fallen Grace, thank you for the follow. Maxi, thank you for the follow as well. Melo Binu. Okay, so basically we've already done him. We gotta do Mel. We gotta do Oberon. We should have already done Percy. Right? Did we already do red hair? I feel like we already did red hair. Percy's 25 million. Okay. Did we already do red hair? Red hair we did. So then it's just Caster. Okay. I'll try to do all of these tonight right here real quick, chat. And Melisson is, again, another really strong, really power creepy unit. Like I've been saying throughout the entire course of these videos, this is exactly the unit that pretty much all other AoE Lancers are compared to at this point. It's so much so that I've actually, at certain points, gone off on basically the devs for kind of how strong they made her. The issue at play here is that Melisson is so strong that they basically overtuned her to the point that she is actually wasteful. I'm going to make a point on that as we go through, but again, just stay tuned and you'll understand what I mean. It does not mean she is a bad unit. In fact, she is basically the gold standard at this point for what AoE Lancers should be. So, as we start to look at the laundry list of traits that she has there, we're just going to instead focus on the fact she is double buster, double arts. So she does have that synergy no matter what her NP type is, because that is the big thing with Mel. She can change her NP type and thus the card type of her NP as well by comparison. So she does have 12k attack, which is just a stellar attack stat. And again, you can see her first skill here increases her own attack for 3 turns by 40%. We'll also reduce her damage taken by 500 for 3 turns. It will increase her own max HP for 3 turns as if she needed a heal, as if anyone was going to actually touch her, basically by 2,000. And then we'll also charge her gauge by 30% on a 6-turn cooldown. Due to the fact this is on a 6-turn cooldown, this means you can double the skill up, use it on turns 1 and 3 within a 3-turn. In fact, there is a reason to actually really want to lure this skill, because basically if you manage to unlock her mana loading and utilize this skill, you actually have the capability of starting Mel from a 50% C instead of a Black Grail, and this is actually going to free up how you use the 3rd skill. I'll make the point when we get to it over there, but understand that this may actually be more beneficial than trying to start her from 0 in scenarios like events where you're forced to take an event CE. Her second skill here increases her own critical star absorption for 3 turns by 5,000%. This is absolutely incredibly overkill. This is the amount of star absorption that Berserkers and Avengers need, not a Lancer that has 90 star absorption. The amount of star absorption Mel would have probably actually needed would have instead been about somewhere around the 1,000 to 2,000 range at most. So 5,000 is the epitome of overkill. Her star gen basically is 10 stars per turn for 3 turns, and she will also have a crit star bomb here of 1000%. The whole reason that this is set to 5000 actually has to do with Lancelot, her sort of contemporary, because again, he ends up having a really strong star absorption on his as well. Her third skill here, basically Ray Horizon, is how you're going to switch her NP. Melisande starts out as a single target arts NP in her first and second stages. Melisande can be transitioned into her third ascension, which will change her NP to AoE Buster. This is why that thing that I talked about with that first skill matters, and you'll see here in a second. So basically, if you utilize it in stages 1 and 2, it will transform her into stage 3, changing her to AoE Buster, charging her gauge by 100%, and granting herself invincibility for 1 turn. So again, really, really strong in terms of its capability. Once you're in stage 3, it will basically increase her NP damage for 3 turns by 30% and grant her still the 1 turn of invincibility. Thus, the logic kind of goes that if you manage to actually lure this skill here, manage to lure the mana loading, and start her with a 50% CE, she can handle that right there. You can take double buffs from basically Koyanskaya's, have that work basically for that, and then basically get her 30% charge skill back by turn 3 and combine that with an Oberon. This allows her to start out and basically double pop this third skill, gaining you extra NP damage, as you would be able to utilize this on turns 1 and 2, essentially skipping over the need to actually utilize her 100% charge. But again, that's a niche scenario, and for the majority of people, I think you'll find starting her out basically with an MLB Black Grail is going to be your go-to. You're going to start her out in stages 1 to 2, and then instead pop this skill, get her 100% charge, and then basically use double Koyanskaya, bringing her up to full for the second wave there, and then basically Oberon plus her first skill here in order to enable that. So again, there's a lot of ways that you can use her, but the important thing to denote in all of this is that Melisande actually doesn't need all 100% of this charge. That is to say, you could have still forced Melisande to be able to 3-turn from 0% charge if this charge skill were set at only 50%. So yet another extremely wasteful aspect of Melisande's kit. She absolutely does not need this in order for her to succeed and be able to 3-turn from 0. She has 50% more charge than she actually needs. Is what it is. Basically, we get to her Noble Phantasm again. In her single target form, it is single target arts. It is a 5-hit MP. It deals damage to 1 enemy. It's not the best damage amongst single target Lancers, but it doesn't need to be because it's still pretty decent. It increases their damage taken by 1000 for 5 turns, very similar to Saber Lancelot's NP, and gains her 10 crit stars as if she needed more. Her overcharge effect increases her NP gen rate by 3 turns, activating first by 20%. This means that it will stack as you continue to loop with her single target form, making it easier for her to subsequently loop turn after turn. It's actually a really powerful effect if you manage to do this, and this is why, as long as you have Melisande, you basically at this point don't need any other AoE Lancer or even a single target Lancer potentially. This is a really weird situation that I think the devs have found themselves in, and they are going to eventually have to buff the Lancers if they want anyone to roll for anything other than Mel. Still, at the end of the day, this is pretty good, but it is not going to result in her dealing the most damage out of all the Lancers. Her third stage, though, as we've mentioned, is AoE Buster. This is a stage that most people actually will use her in the majority of the time just because of how much damage they can amp. It's got Invuln Pierce as if she needed yet another really strong effect. So again, you're not going to stop Mel. It deals damage to all enemies, inflicts burn to them. So yes, you could even use her with something like Honey Lake if you wanted, though the Invuln Pierce would be redundant on her. She will also then increase her own Buster performance for 3 turns, activating first by 20%, so you are going to have the ability to keep stacking this, making her stronger in a 3-turn loop, and having her just be able to really pop off. So again, Melisande is absolutely a cracked unit at this point in time, and there are going to be a lot of people that are going to be rolling for her since this is her return. You will see that she is a unit that has held up really well, but it's mostly just due to the fact of Again, they have not really actually managed to buff anybody alongside to actually compete with her, and they're going to have to do a lot in order to make anyone in the Lancer category that competition. Oberon is your next unit up, and well, I can safely say that if you didn't roll for Oberon 18 months ago by the time you get to this banner, you're going to want to roll for Oberon here. So I highly recommend saving. Oberon is just sort of the premier power creep unit in the game at this point. He represents a monumental shift in damage output. He is a support that I believe everybody should try to get their hands on, whether or not you actually feel like you need him. The reason for this is just due to the actual health bloat that's going on in the game. We've seen the devs actually put in 90++ nodes in response to him, and it's certainly the reason that they kept him gone for 18 months, because I think they feared the amount of damage scalability that Oberon enabled. I'm not sure whether or not the devs actually realized this ahead of time or it was a reactionary gesture, but at the end of the day, Oberon is absolutely a unit to get the most bang for your buck out of your account. As long as you're not talking about 90++ nodes, Oberon is a unit that enables you to actually be able to, do just about everything with NP1s. He is that strong of a support, he is that strong of an enabler, and he just absolutely will help a more free-to-play minded account be able to do big boy damage. The issue at play, though, is then they come out with the 90++ nodes, and it's not that Oberon becomes essential by any means, it's just that he essentially will make your life easier in those nodes. Certainly, you can do 90++ without him, but it will be somewhat difficult, especially if you don't have the right units, or especially if you don't have the right NP levels. So that is the issue with 90++ content. If you don't have damage bonus in the event, or you don't have high NP levels, you're almost going to have to use Oberon to even have a chance. So it is what it is, but again, it's going to come down to whether or not you actually feel like you have to min turn those nodes, and in some cases, thankfully, you don't. So what makes Oberon so strong? Well, it's basically he is an AoE buster pretender. He increases the party's NP damage for 3 turns by 30%, which is just a strong effect naturally, due to the fact that this is actually an NP damage buff, though, which when he originally came out was the rarest of sort of the 3 steroid types that you could get outside of super effective damage. So this was a really nice sort of synergistic addition to a lot of comps, as it just scaled multiplicatively and it just allowed for a lot of damage. He will also charge the party's NP gauge by 20%, which is very strong in and of itself. This gives him the ability to sort of raise the entire party up rather than just one devoted unit like we have with Scotty. So definitely a strong skill in a nutshell. The second skill here charges one ally's NP gauge by 50% and gives a 20 crit star bomb. However, it will also drain their charge by 20% after 1 turn. So just be careful with how you utilize this. It's not necessarily the best thing to use with arts and quick loopers. But again, as long as you use this skill on the 3rd turn of a 3-turn loop, you don't care because the drain won't occur until after the node is functionally done. However, again, you can use this on a Buster unit at potentially any time as long as they don't have charge after their NP, because Buster units don't really care about refund. Again, the other consideration is that you may have to use it sooner than that, but it is what it is. Utilizing it on the 3rd turn is almost always safe. Utilizing it earlier, you just have to consider how you're going to use it. His 3rd skill here, though, is the actual world killer, if you will. This is a buster up of 1 turn by 50%. That is the least important aspect of this skill, hilariously enough. It's going to grant them an NP damage boost to his target. What this does effectively is it doubles every source of NP damage that a unit has, including from craft essences and mystic codes. So things like Black Grail that give 80% NP damage now give double instead. So it's very strong, and it's why it absolutely just ended up breaking the game in a lot of ways in terms of the amount of damage it allowed. It is only for 1 turn, though, and again, you're going to want to use this on the final turn in a 3-turn loop, because the way to understand this is it will put the unit to eternal sleep after that. Your unit is completely bricked and unusable. There is no way around this effect. You cannot prevent it from landing. landing, short of killing your unit before it lands. So again, yes, you can Arash someone, you can Qinggong someone, but only to the extent that you've done it before the buff lands. Yes, that's right, I said buff. That's why you can't prevent it, no matter what way you can think of to try and prevent this. Trust me when I say that someone has already thought of it, we have already tested it, and it does not in fact work. So again, this is a pretty foolproof way of stopping people from actually being able to get around it. But that is the trade-off, is that Oberon is very much a damage amplifier, glass cannon type of unit. The second you pop off with that, you hit really hard, but you've blown your load and you can no longer use the unit after their turn ends. So be very careful with how you utilize this, including stuff like order change, also not going to work. So again, the fact that he's also 50% buster up here is really solid for buster units, but due to the actual strength of this effect, due to the doubling up of every source of NP damage, Oberon is good even in arts and quick comps as well, and that is what makes him a support that everyone will want to have. And we still haven't even talked about the rest of his kit, including his peculiarity with regards to being used alongside Merlin, which is the fact that you just don't want to use them in the party at the exact same time. His NP basically deals damage to all enemies, removes their offensive buffs, and then puts them to sleep for one turn. The demerit, though, is that it will also make the enemy invincible after the fact. You can get around this with Invuln Pierce or pre-carding, but I highly recommend going with the pre-carding route rather than the Invuln Pierce route, because if you Invuln Pierce it, you will wake them up out of sleep, which is kind of the entire benefit of using this, is that the unit will fall asleep almost as if they are stunned for the duration of that turn, making them unable to act when it is their turn. His overcharge effect, though, deals damage to lawful alignment enemies. It is super effective, and it does have its niche uses that can actually allow him to do decent damage, particularly if he puts his own skills on himself. But again, I can't stress enough how much Oberon is actually pretty much a really awesome unit, and how you really want to roll him if at all possible. We have already managed to talk about Percival and Red Hair in prior segments, so we will just round this out by talking about Kucaster. So Kucaster here ends up being a really strong AoE caster at this point in time. When he first started out in the game, he was actually just this sort of cockroachy, survivable AoE caster. He did not deal good damage. He had, decent survivability, but that was pretty much all he offered. He was a buster AoE with a triple arts deck. So again, another sort of year one type of design. His first skill has had its upgrade, though, basically increasing crit damage and debuff resistance for 3 turns by 50% each, but now also giving him a 30% charge on a 5-turn cooldown. Really solid, and a double coin Skya comp means, yes, you can 3-turn with him. But not from 50%, instead from 0%. That's right, Kucaster is a 3-star that is a Black Grail Looper, and that's what makes him so strong now. He grants himself evasion for 3 attacks with no expiration timing, so very strong in terms of survival, and also an increase to his own defense by 18%, all on a 5-turn cooldown. Ironically enough, this is a skill you don't have to lore on him regardless. His third skill has had its upgrade, but basically it starts out just as a simple disengage with a debuff cleanse and a heal, and then instead gets upgraded to now increase his own attack for 3 turns by 30%, and to also basically grant him the ability to have a delayed buff. Basically what it's going to do is it's going to put a guts on him, and then at the end of the turn it is going to sacrifice him. When the guts is procced, he will get 80% charge. So at the end of the turn, basically, he ends up dying, his guts procs, he gets 80% charge as he pops back up, and essentially you have it back for the next turn. This is all on a 5-turn cooldown, so you can do this at least twice in a 3-turn cadence, and that is why you want to pop this skill on turns 1 and 2, so that he just ends up handling basically 160% of his necessary 300% charge right there. With a double coin Skya setup, you can get at least another 100% charge, and, well, Ku also has mana loading and a 30% charge skill that he can double up on, basically allowing for another 80% charge here. You do the math. Either way, that is well over 300, so it is what it is. His NP has had its NP interlude. It basically increases his own buster performance by 20% for 3 turns, activating first and dealing damage to all enemies. He will reduce their defense further for 3 turns by 10% after the damage goes out and inflict burn for 10 turns to them. Really solid in that capacity as well. If you manage to need Invuln Pierce, Honey Lake is actually going to be really good on him because of that burn effect. And then similarly, being able to start out from Black Grail makes him quite the monster as far as a 3-star caster goes. He is a 3-star caster that actually rivals the 5 stars in terms of damage in a lot of ways. So again, getting your hands on more copies of Ku Caster is really solid because everybody should have at least NP1 of him from the initial Fuyuki Singularity. So this is a decent time to roll for him since he is story locked, and you will see the banner pairings are actually quite nice. So right now you can see you got Muramasa paired with Red Hair, who is another story locked unit. You've got basically Melisson paired with Percival. Good luck to those of you that want an AoE Lancer. You just may not get the AoE Lancer you want. And again, Oberon paired with a story locked Ku Caster is one hell of a banner, one of the better banners you will see all year, depending on how you want to develop your account. And last but not least, of the actual Road to 7 campaign here is the commemorative CE that you got at the end of LB6. You got 1 copy of it. Now you can potentially get MLB of it if you're a collector. Otherwise, this is a story locked CE, so good luck trying to actually get it without rolling in the story banner. Again, though, this is a very strong set of banners right here for the Road to 7 campaign, so I highly recommend you guys consider how you feel about them and whether or not you wish to save courts. That's just sort of the onset here for the entirety of December. Finito for right there, chat. All right, chat. Tomorrow we end it. Tomorrow dear God, why did December have so much? Anyways, tomorrow we will finally be done. Finally. With banner review. Go, thank you for the resub for 8 months. How are you doing? Again, Panic Patrick, Fallen Grace, Maxi, thank you guys for the follows right there while I was recording. I usually, while I'm recording, wait until the end to actually do it. For those of you guys on YouTube, I still see you. I understand. I say Breedomart is good as well. Banner review, yes, yeah. So you guys will actually get the actual videos. I'm going to end up turning them over to AP, who's going to be editing this one for me as a favor. So again, hopefully we can get you guys the actual full-blown banner review soon. But we'll be wrapping up banner review tomorrow. Whew. There's a lot of reading, chat. Let me see who all's on tonight. Who all I can give some love to. I'm going to send you guys over to Mr. Caldigers. He's on tonight playing some Lethal Company. And I'm going to be back tomorrow, hopefully with a voice that has managed to hang on all of this time. Honestly, having the mic a little bit closer to my mouth helps out. I don't have to project as much, so that is nice. Hope you guys had a good one. Good luck on your rolls if you guys still haven't rolled on JP. Again, you got a little bit of time left, I suspect, on Barbados, but not too much longer, so get him killed, and I will see you guys tomorrow as we continue on with our new JP event.